How do you hold accountable a group of people so good at not existing?
If ever there was a church set up to explicitly avoid the pitfall of so many religions, which is their downfall due to sex, money, and power, it was your church. It didn't even have a name. It didn't even have a legal organizational structure. It totally downplayed and then erased its founder. So like, how could anything go wrong?
It was hard to imagine existing outside of 2x2ism. Like we couldn't picture what life outside would even look like. It was too hard to imagine. It was easier to imagine us just disappearing from life altogether. If it's so hard to leave this religion that death seems like a reasonable way out, it's a cult.
I thought the fact that I'm even here feeling this right now is because I'm giving too much weight to something that's not giving me anything back. When I really, really need something to lean on, there's nothing there. And that's not my fault. I can't say I was a doubting person that was always sinning all the time. All the things that you would say about somebody who left, like, oh, they never really had it. I did really have it. I based my life around it. It's not what you do. It's who you are on a molecular level.
It's your identity. It's your marriage. It's your family relationships. It's your community. It's your worldview.
Then, very well-known, highly respected overseer was found dead in a hotel room. He was an abuser who abused women and children. It felt like the last good guy that we knew was going down. Like it felt like if he has allegations, who doesn't? Like the whole thing is corrupt, right? That's how it felt to us at the time.
We started having people flooding to us for information.
Our group was just absolutely exploding because people were hearing about it because we were sharing public information, and then word of mouth, and everyone was like, where's the information coming from? It's coming from the support group. So we had a lot of ex-members who had been out for a long time just hearing about the group. We had a mass exodus from the 2x2s who were flocking to our group.
You didn't just heal and ride off into the sunset. You decided to try and provide community for other people, right? And support.
We gave the X community an identity. That was our goal in pushing the term 2x2, was this is our identity. This is the culture we came from. It has a name.
You're kind of like Leah Remini and Mike Rinder taking down a cult. What do you do when you wake up one day and realize that you may be in a cult or a high demand religion and you're married with 3 kids? Hi, I'm John DeLynn. This is Mormon Stories Podcast. It's March 12th, 2025. And we're here in part 2 of our in-depth interview with Kari and Kyle Hanks. Hey, guys.
Hi, John.
Welcome back.
Hi again.
We just spent 2.5 hours in part 1 hearing all about the Christian tradition known as the 2x2s. They actually don't have a name or an organizational structure that is in any way legal or corporate. You'll have to go back to part 1 to learn all about that. But we learned about their history, their beliefs, and then we heard primarily from Kari and kind of her experience growing up as a 2x2, kind of her lived experience, all the way through marrying Kyle and having 3 children. And then we sort of ended with that cliffhanger of Kari, as soon as COVID happens, having a little bit more time, stopping attending her 2x2 meetings, reading a bunch of books that no 2x2, no self-respecting, faithful 2x2 should ever be reading, like Bart Ehrman or Christopher Hitchens or Richard Dawkins, which led to her wondering whether she was in a cult or a high-demand religion. And that's where we left off. I'm here today again with Margie. Hey, Margie.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. So what we're going to be covering this time is basically, we want to hear, Kyle, kind of your, anything you want to share about your upbringing in the 2x2s, or however you would describe it. And then what it was like once COVID hits and the wheels start coming off the wagon. And then we'll talk about how you both handled that as a married couple with kids. And then, of course, a really important part of your story is finding Mormon stories, why ex-2x2 members or questioning 2x2 members would be interested in Mormon stories at all. We love our Never Mormon audiences, and we can't get enough interviewing people who never been Mormon but find value in Mormon stories. And then we'll talk about not only your deconversion and leaving of the 2x2 faith, but also starting or helping start with others a Facebook support group for people who have left or are leaving or questioning the 2x2 movement or organization or non-organization, whatever you want to call it. That's my intro for this part 2. I would ask everyone to please take a second to like this episode, to comment on it, to subscribe to our YouTube channel or Facebook or wherever, Spotify, and to share this episode with anyone who you think who might value it, because all of that really helps our growth. And we're also super thankful to our donors, because we couldn't do this without our monthly donors. And if you want to become a donor, it's really simple. You just go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, and become a monthly donor. That's all we have for anything other than just to jump right back in your story. So, Kari, when we left off, it was 2020-ish. You had read all these books and you were thinking about whether your church is true. You'd lost your faith in God and you were questioning whether you wanted to remain a 2x2. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
Anything else either of you want to correct about the intro? Did I get anything fundamentally wrong?
Sounds good.
No?
You got it all.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Margie, anything you want to add?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Well, let's jump back just a bit in the timeline, because Kyle, we didn't kind of hear your founding story, and mostly we're interested in anything you want to add about your lived experience as a 2x2 that you think would be interesting for our audience, that kind of highlights important aspects of the tradition, but also unhealthy aspects of your tradition, and even more specifically, as we mentioned, the items that started building up on your 2x2 shelf that ended up leading to the eventual collapse.
Sure. Yeah, well, so my history goes back 3 or 4 generations, and for reasons I'll probably talk about in a bit, I don't know all of my family history in the 2x2s, but I know a couple of the stories that are kind of interesting. One of them, we talked about those preachers that come to the early workers that came to the U.S. and traveled around. One of my family members, one of my great-grandparents, sat in one of those missions and knew immediately that it was amazing and wanted some more of that. And the workers at that time were doing mission-style gospel meetings, we call them, every night of the week at that time. They were really recruiting. And my grandfather went and heard them. My great-grandfather, went and heard them. And after 3 nights, he knew he was listening every night. He listened every night for 6 weeks. And after the 3rd night, he knew this was it. These guys are doing it just like the Bible says. And his whole family joined the 2x2s. And so that was one of my grandparents. And that grandparent married a professing person as well. The other side of my family, actually, one was professing, was a 2x2, and the other was not originally. My great-grandfather on one side of my family was a minister. I believe it was Methodism, and even built a church at one point, which I visited, which is kind of neat. It's a coffee shop now. But he told his son, my grandfather, well, they had these discussions about, does anybody really go around like the Bible and do it just like the Bible says, in pairs of ministers? And so he said, I think it's possible. I think it can be done. I think you can go in faith. So be on the lookout for that. I don't know how to do it, but be on the lookout for that. So he was, and then he met my grandmother, and she brought him to a gospel meeting, and the rest is history. He understood it, saw it when he was ready to see it. And so both sides of my family professed, and I was born into that world. So yeah, I was born in 1983 to goodly parents. We don't use that term. I've just heard it on here. Yeah, so my family is very similar to Kari's in a lot of ways. Very conservative, kind of a Rush Limbaugh conservative family. I was born, actually went home to Federal Way, but then we moved out to Enumclaw, Washington, a country, kind of a farming community in Western Washington, and they wanted to raise us out there in a kind of a safe farming town. That's what they wanted for us. So we grew up out there, and there were a lot of 2x2 people in that area, oddly enough. I think there were 2 or 3 different Sunday morning meetings, which each one would have had 3 or 4, maybe 5 families in each one. So I grew up around a lot of, we call them professing kids, professing friends and family. And throughout my life, there was a sharp delineation between professing friends, professing family, and everybody else. And it was the first time I remember that separation being notable was when I brought a friend home from school one time. We were allowed to have friends at school, but they were worldly, though. We didn't want to get too involved with any of them. So a friend came over from school, after school, and we played around. And then my mom said, okay, it's time for him to go home. And I said, what? Why can't he stay for dinner? My friends always stay for dinner. No, he needs to go home. And that's when I first realized, oh, we're completely separate. This is a different type of person. We're different people. And that, I absorbed that as a responsibility from that point forward, of upholding a standard of being the good professing, God-fearing person in a family that had a lineage that went back several generations. I actually felt very compelled by that feeling for most of my childhood. We'd get reminded about it a lot, to remember to uphold the family's name. My parents would send me out the door every morning to school. Remember whose kid you are. This is important to not just carry the family name, but the family name was downstream of God. We're professing. We profess our love for Jesus every day. We are the light of the world. So I took that very seriously. I was a very serious professing kid. I took it as a responsibility to be an example to everybody. And I knew I was different from a very early age, and that was good. It was scary sometimes. It was lonely at school, knowing that I was a little different than everybody else. Maybe didn't celebrate the same holidays and didn't know about the TV shows, but that felt like the right thing. So I grew up as a very serious kid. I think of myself that way anyway. And when I was, something I'm going to mention because it'll come up a little later, is when I was 8 years old, I became diabetic, type 1 diabetes. I got Fifth disease, which I don't think it's called Fifth disease anymore. I think there's a name for it, but it's one of those measles, mumps, rubella type diseases, viruses, I guess. Mm-hmm. I got that, and I think it damaged my immune system or something. It ended up damaging my pancreas, and I got diabetes at 8 years old. So at 8 years old, I went from nothing one day to getting real thirsty one day. Next day I was in the hospital, and I came out giving myself injections, and my parents gave me a lot of injections, gave me all of the injections at first, and then I learned how to do it. And being that kind of, I think that sort of plays into me being a real responsible, scrupulous kid, serious kid. Like, this is a serious thing I have. I need to be careful with this. I need to be careful. We always hear from the workers, be careful, be careful, be careful. Be careful spiritually. Now I can be careful naturally. I was just a careful, cautious kid. Didn't like to take any risks. Becoming diabetic was a very serious thing, obviously. And I remember the emotional toll it was on my parents to have to take care of a very sick kid. And that meant a lot to me. Even at the time, I was very aware at 8 years old. I was very aware that they were working real hard to keep me alive sometimes. As a young kid, at first I had a pretty good honeymoon phase for about 6 months after getting it, but I became, what's the word I'm looking for? Very volatile blood sugars, I guess you could say.
What do you mean by honeymoon phase?
It was a phase where my pancreas kind of kicked back in for a few months after I got diabetes, and sort of worked for a while, and then went full on. And that's fairly typical from what I've heard. But I had a lot of,
but I figured the audience might not. So.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so that was just part of my upbringing too. So I had a lot of, and I bring that up because it was like a very serious time and a very serious thing, and I had to be very careful. I remember my mom is in the medical field. My family didn't have the anti-education vibe that some professing people do. My grandparents on one side were actually educators, and my mom and my dad both have degrees. My dad has worked in manufacturing. My mom is in medical field, and so she knew exactly what to do with a diabetic kid. And I remember my dad being a little bit nervous about having to put injections into a little kid, and it affected him a lot. And I remember him practicing on potatoes. He would take a potato and practice first on that, and then he would come do it on me because he was just so worried about hurting me. And that means a lot to me. And I'll talk about that more as I go, but I took that on as even more responsibility. It's like, they're taking very good care of me. I need to even be more responsible. I need to never let them down on this. I need to be really strong in whatever place I have. Professing kid, diabetic kid, whatever kid, light of the world kid, I need to take that very seriously. So I actually had a meeting in my home as well. We didn't have a Sunday morning meeting. We had a Wednesday night Bible study in our home. And that was a privilege.
So that's called an open home, right?
Yeah, we had an open home.
I'm learning.
Yeah. Yeah, we were open. And so for us, weekends wasn't as big a deal for us as far as Friday, Saturday. But on Wednesdays, I'd come home and I'd have about an hour to do my schoolwork and then time to start cleaning up around the house. And I would vacuum and I would set up the chairs and do some of the dusting and stuff and get the house all clean for people to come over and have a Bible study that evening. It was my family was very serious as well. It was a very sacred duty to have this Bible study in the one true way.
This probably goes without saying, but if you haven't watched part 1 of this interview, you'll get a lot more out of it if you pause, go watch part 1, where we explain the history of the 2x2s and its structure. Because that joke I just made about, being an open home, there's significance to that and other things of just being able to hold meetings in the house, that sort of thing. So we're not going to retread all that history. Go back and watch the first part and then come here for the second. Sorry, just had to make that explicit.
Yeah, no, that's great. I won't repeat too much. Kari covered a lot of great stuff in that episode, so I won't cover too much of it again, but we had very similar upbringings in that way, just with maybe a little bit different emphasis in certain places like education. Education was very important in my family. And I guess I'll talk about education a little bit later too, but I stood to my feet and professed in a gospel meeting when I was either 10 or 11. I can't actually remember which year. And we talked about emotions on the last episode. And yeah, I cried too, because I was making such a serious decision and everyone else around me felt emotional. And to this day, I'm not exactly sure why everyone feels so emotional when a kid who's too young to make any decisions joins a church, but they feel it.
Can you give us an example of what's said when a kid professes? Just
said to the kid or
no, what a kid says when he stands up and professes.
So the kid doesn't actually say anything. So the way that typically is done is they'll have one of these gospel meetings, these mission meetings, and they'll announce a hymn and they'll sing the hymn and they'll say, if anybody wants to join, you can feel free to stand at the last verse or two or whatever they decide.
Oh, it's literally
everyone's
just standing
singing
up
during it.
It's kind of...
Yeah, everyone's singing the hymn while you're standing there.
Oh.
So you just stand up and everybody looks at you.
And then when the hymn is over, the worker will come to the mic and say, please be seated. And so everyone who professed sits down. And then often after the meeting, they'll have whoever professed come up to talk to the workers, and they'll just be like, I don't even remember what they said to me. I think they gave me like a list of, like a study list to read or something. Or
so it's literally just an act of standing up.
You don't have to make a public proclamation verbally.
Okay.
No, you don't have to say much. I think of it kind of like an altar call I've heard from other Christian churches, Protestant churches.
But from then on, you do speak in every single meeting. You give a prayer and a testimony in every meeting.
Yeah.
From then on.
And so I, of course, felt even more responsibility. Like, oh, now I'm part of this. Now I'm carrying this with me. I need to really be a good example to the kids at my school now, and stuff like that.
Are your hymns similar to normal Christian hymns? Like,
that's a really good question.
They borrow a lot from other
They do
religions
borrow a
and
lot.
people.
Every once in a while, we'll be watching a show or something that's religious, and we'll hear a hymn in the background. We'll recognize the tune. When my grandfather, who was a Methodist, son of a Methodist preacher, he was actually a Methodist minister himself, but he never preached. He had gotten his ordination in the mail, and then he just threw it away because since then he'd found the one true way, the 2x2s, and so he never actually preached as a Methodist minister. And in his hymnal, he actually had titles of Methodist hymns next to the titles of ours, because it helped him remember the tune.
Sung to the tune of
that kind of thing.
Our hymnal has the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of hymns are written by 2x2s. I wrote a hymn when I was 15. It's not in the hymn book that they use in meetings, but it's in a supplemental hymn book that they published for like people to have displayed in their home on the piano or whatever.
Do y'all know if there are any hymns you sang that would have the same music as a traditional Christian hymn? Like,
not off the top of my head.
Like
what's that one that they play in the Titanic when the ship is sinking?
Nearer My God to Thee.
Yeah,
that's one. Yeah, that's one. Is it the same words though? It's the same.
I think it's the same words. I'm not sure. There is one to the tune of Aloha Oe by Elvis. There's a hymn that matches that tune. There is. I think there's a lot, but we're not sure where the crossover is, to be completely honest.
Okay.
Our hymn book has 412 hymns, so there's a lot of them.
And they have retooled a lot of them over time. That's an interesting thing we've learned since leaving as well, is that they've actually redone some of the words to sort of match a slightly tweaked theology over time. Again, nothing's really written down, but we feel this way right now, so they retool the words just a little bit. It's only happened a couple times in the history.
The most recent hymn book was published in the 80s. We're still using that one, I think,
Yeah, let's see. So we had the meetings in our homes. That was really important. We were a very serious family about professing. It was the most important thing in our family, period. we had hobbies. I played sports. I played basketball. I was very tall when I was young. I was actually about 6 feet tall by the time I was in junior high. And I was coordinated. So I played basketball a lot and I really liked it. But there was always that undertone, kind of like we heard in Kari's story of, well, make sure that you keep the most important thing first. Keep first things first. We'd hear that phrase a lot. If these hobbies start taking up too much time and they start taking up meeting time and you miss a meeting here or there, that's not good. We don't want to do that. So I always had that running in the back of my mind as well. And let's see, we didn't have a TV. I think we talked about that. That's important. But my hobbies, I really liked basketball when I was younger, and being diabetic, I needed to have activity, and they were like, perfect, join some basketball teams. And I played pretty well, and I was okay. When I got to high school, when I got to junior high, the high school coaches were watching me and saying, hey, maybe come play for our team. And sometimes they'd invite me into practice with the varsity players, the seniors, because they're like, this guy's pretty coordinated and he might get taller. And when I played freshman year of high school, and then I quit because I started looking at the schedules and I realized there's going to be practices on Wednesday nights when my family has a Bible study. There's going to be games maybe on Wednesday nights or traveling on a Sunday morning, especially when I wasn't old enough to drive myself. I can't make other people sacrifice their time in these professing meetings. I can't make them sacrifice that for me. So I quit. I just didn't do it. And I have a little bit of regret around that. I mean, I probably wouldn't have played pro, but that's just, I give that example as that is our view on it. It's meetings first, everything else second.
It's almost like when you start liking something to the point that it becomes a passion, the 2x2s tell you at that point it's not healthy anymore. So you never really develop passions for things because it's dangerous. It's not healthy.
Yeah, everything in your life needs to be designed to pull you to the center of the fold. So that can be friendships. I had friends when I was younger that stepped aside from meetings, so I just didn't talk to them anymore. I didn't hate them. I didn't dislike them. If I'd have seen them, I would have been nice to them, but they weren't the best friends. The best friends are the ones in the meetings. And that just became my internal voice. That's just who I was until adulthood, honestly. Just whenever there's a fork in the road, take the one that takes you closer to the meetings, and don't be a stumbling block. Whatever you do, don't cause another person to stumble. I had things that I liked. I wasn't bothered by music. My family didn't really like music. They didn't like it played in the house. I listened to rap music in headphones. I didn't see it as a problem. It was art to me. I liked it. But I knew not to play it out loud because I didn't want it to bother anybody else in the house. And I didn't want them they'd go to pray at night and then they'd have this music going in their head. That's kind of the devil working. And for some reason that worked. I was like, well, that's fine. I won't do it then. I won't offend anybody else with my stuff. But I think a lot of my beliefs when I was younger, a lot of what I did was just based on, let's try not to offend anybody. Let's try not to pull anybody else away. Let's be really, really faithful, be responsible. So that was most of my upbringing.
I think it's to the point that like even now you and I struggle with how do we have fun? Like life is always about responsibilities and being serious and like taking care of what needs to be taken care of. But when we have some free time, how do we enjoy ourselves? Like how do we have fun? That's actually been difficult to figure out.
Yeah, that's why I say it becomes your internal voice on some level too. It's I still battle it too. It's like, well, I could go do this hobby, but I got to do something important. I got to go do the dishes or mow the yard or something. I still have a little bit of that in me.
I actually have the answer for you. Do you want to know what it is?
Yes.
It's karaoke.
Karaoke.
That is the one that is the one true answer for how to have fun.
Okay. The one and only one.
For John.
The correct way.
That is the answer
me.
For an
John.
extrovert, right?
No, I'm kidding. That's where I found joy.
Okay. Well,
along with lots of
might have to
TV.
try that.
And puzzles.
Okay, karaoke and
And
separates.
baths.
And
We do like
e-bikes.
shows.
And-
We do like catching up on shows that we missed out on when we were
Everyone
young.
see Severance. Okay, back to you.
Throwback to the previous episode.
Yes.
So the only other thing that I think is interesting about my upbringing is that being very serious, professing, God-fearing family, that was all the time. If we went on a vacation, we found meetings. We would call around, pre-internet days or even, like pre-social media and all that. We would get a phone number from someone who would give us a phone number to a worker, to a friend somewhere, and we would find a Sunday morning meeting somewhere. And sometimes that meant shooting a whole Sunday of your vacation, driving an hour and a half to somebody's house because this is important. We need to go meet with these people. We may never see them again. We may never have seen them before, but it was an important part of our life. And in some ways, that's kind of cool. It's a unique experience that I can't give my kids. I've been to Sunday morning meetings on islands in the Caribbean when we went on a cruise one time. And instead of going to the beach like the normal cast, the normal people on the boat, we went to a meeting with 3 people up on a hill on an island somewhere.
Can I ask you a question about that? So how do you find those meetings if it's secret? Like if it's not really
That's a great question.
Yeah. Well, the 2x2s aren't a great community, but they're a great network. They can, people know people who know people. And similar to how we love to trace, everyone loves to sit around and trace back. When did the truth find us? Who was the first person to profess? They love to do that. They also love to find all the connections because invariably you're related to somebody. I mean, it's not that big of a group and everyone's born in. So there's a lot of people connected to a lot of people. And I think when we were in that example I just gave, I think somebody else had talked to a worker who had gotten him a hold of the overseer of the area that covered the Caribbean at that time. And he knew of somebody on this island and somebody else had the same scenario, so they gave us the contact info.
You would often start by calling your Sunday morning elder, and then they would be like, well, I know someone who was there last year. Let me call and ask them. And then it's these connections. And just to clarify, not everyone is born in. There are people who are converted.
No, for sure. But I would say the vast majority. Yeah. There's not a lot of converts. They're not like... I just
don't want to dismiss people.
No, we talked about that last time.
For sure, yeah. And when I hear Mormon stories of people going on missions and baptizing 30 people, I just crack up because I'm sure there's workers right now who haven't converted that many.
30 in a month sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. That seems crazy to us because we don't have. I mean, it's ones and twos basically.
Yeah.
So. Can I ask a question about that? Do you feel like part of that is it lends to the belief of exclusivity? Like if you're not proselyting, does it add to kind of your specialness and value? Do you think that's part of why that was? I know you're just
that's the good question. I think that we've talked a lot about language and how language is manipulated, and the obvious problem with not many converts into the true way is like, how true is it if nobody's getting saved? But there's things you can do with language that makes it okay. Like, well, we love our little meeting. We love our little group. We're just a simple people. You don't know any of us. We're not famous. We're not in politics. We're not celebrities. We're just a little group of people that meets in a home and studies the Bible. And that becomes the value. Hidden in that is the fact that most of the people in that town don't know you exist. But you don't talk in those terms.
Well, I actually preach about, it was frequently preached when we were young, especially like how fortunate and lucky we are out of all the people in the world to be born into this one true religion. And look at all the people out there who are unwilling or have hard hearts or don't want to hear God's true preachers. So it was used to compare and contrast like how fortunate and yes, special and lucky we were to be born into this. Just what are the chances? And then look at all those unwilling people out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that worked on me too because that made me take it very seriously too. I'm really, really lucky to have this. Now, if you would have asked me, even when I was younger, do you think everyone's going to a fiery hell except for you and a handful of people? I probably would have said, no, God's the judge. I'll leave the judgment up to God.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if I could have done that. I would have said, that doesn't make sense. You're right. But God will lead them. However, but I know for me, I have to stay as close to the center as I can. I was blessed and lucky to be here. I need to hang on to this. I need to hang on to the revelation. We talk about that. Don't lose your revelation of truth. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think most people believe everyone else is going to hell, though. I didn't like that idea, but that's how I was taught.
Yeah, we've come to find out in adulthood that we had slightly different feelings about a lot of things, and mine was a little more...
Less literal?
Yeah, because it had to be. For me, it's like, because I pushed on it a couple times and realized it didn't quite hold, so let's, then maybe I can loosen up on that idea a little bit. However, I need to do this. This is really important for me to do this. And of course, once we got married, now I have a family in this, so now I really need to stick with it. So.
Got it.
Yeah, so it's funny because that's not really an answer to your question, but it is kind of how we process, I think, a little bit.
Yeah.
Again, nothing's ever written down, so everyone has to kind of work out their own salvation with fear and trembling.
So you've mentioned a couple descriptors, I think, already of like your family culture, the culture like of your home life. What I heard was serious, right? What are other descriptors that you would use to describe what your home felt like for you?
That's a good question. I would say it was a loving home. loving upbringing. It's funny because I think, and you can clarify the question if you want to, but for me, I think that question sounds like asking, like, how did we feel about it? If that makes sense. Like,
it's more like the values that you
Right.
absorbed. Like, it sounds like also hard work.
It
like
is,
the setting up of the chairs, and you were like very mindful around some of these regular kind of meetings and things that your family kind of helped out with. It's more like the values, the things that you mentioned education. So it's more like from that, like what you absorbed from kind of your home life. And I'm kind of curious, as a compare contrast a little bit to Kari's experience, just because you've mentioned that there were some differences.
Yeah,
I think
education was important.
I think a lot of the differences that we had, you sort of processed internally more in your later years, like college era, wouldn't you say? Like where you started being less literal. Because I wouldn't say that your family wasn't very literal. I feel like they took the Bible very literally and seriously, and like word for word, it was true.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, until you got to the point where that didn't make sense. Like, well, dinosaurs existed. Like, we don't know. We think it was young Earth, but then, I don't know, God.
So science and medicine.
Science and medicine were important in my family.
And education.
Education was really important,
But a lot of those things probably also just weren't talked about in your family.
Yeah,
Is
we
that
just didn't talk
accurate?
about that stuff. We didn't talk about we didn't talk about any sort of thing that would lead to any sort of incongruity.
Not a lot of like in depth.
Yeah.
How about the
discovery
emotion
of
part?
things, yeah.
So Kari was saying, and I know you've talked about this also within the system of belief, right? Was that true in your family too? Kind of emotion overall?
Very shut down.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of
it's
similarities.
emotion. Yeah, exactly. Emotion was secondary to getting it right.
Yeah.
Being right. The word right was spoken a lot in my family. We got to do the right thing, be right, do good. How you felt about it was far secondary to that. It was very rigid in that sense. So if I was uncomfortable with something, I shouldn't be uncomfortable with it. I should do the right thing.
Yeah.
So does that answer that question? I don't. Okay.
And remind me, no TV or TV?
No TV.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely not.
Okay.
To this day, they don't have one.
Okay.
Yeah, and no movie theaters. I went to my first movie theater when I was about 18.
Wow.
And saw about then. I'd have to go back and look, because the first movie I saw was Vertical Limit, which is too bad because that movie's not good. I wish I would have.
I haven't heard of it.
Good. It's not. It's just a silly.
Like, what a waste of my first movie theater.
My first movie, I went and watched it. I was like, this is not even a good movie.
It's like your movie
I don't think I've
Virginity.
seen it.
It's like your movie Virginity. It's like I didn't even have a good experience.
Right, no. And I went with a bunch of kids who were professing. I don't know. We all talked ourselves into doing it or something, or maybe they didn't care.
So it's like an active grave rebellion.
A little bit. It was hesitant rebellion
Such
for
a
me. My
rebellious
parents were
thing
not
to do.
happy about it. But then they also were like, well, you're old enough to make your own decisions. Like
It's your Rumspringa.
Yeah, just one night of watching a terrible movie. And then back to it.
Oh, the loss.
You lost your movie virtue.
Yeah, I'll try to regain it. I'll watch Severance. So I mentioned traveling around. We traveled. One of the things I liked that we did when I was younger was travel to different conventions around the country. So I mentioned that there's a lot of different annual conventions, and they don't all run at the same time. You might have one or two running, and then the workers will move to the next one and move to the next one. And I grew up going to a lot of them, especially before I had any responsibility in life. I was at 16 to say 20 range, where you got a car or a friend with a car or something. And of course, that's where you meet professing girls who were good enough, right? I was very scrupulous about that too. I've never dated anybody but Kari. I don't know if I've ever said that publicly, but Kari's the first person I dated. I was too awkward anyway when I was younger. I just wasn't very good at that. But
you should say why that is, like why you had that standard of not dating.
Yeah, because it's hard for me to wrap my mind around exactly, other than just being kind of awkward. But also I just really wanted a person who shared my values, which was professing and going to all the meetings and doing all the things. And also that I was attractive to. Well, it's not that big of a church. That's a real needle to thread. So I'm glad I found Kari for sure. But finding somebody who matches all of the values that you have when it's a very small group is not easy to do. So
and I think there's a lot of pressure on like finding someone good enough and like not letting down.
Yeah, with a high standard. And of course,
Right.
Kari, like she mentioned, wrote a hymn. You can't get more professing than that. She wrote a hymn that's actually in a published book. It's not used in the meetings right now, and maybe it won't be if they hear about this.
Oh, the irony now.
Yeah, it says Kari Hanks because they published it after we were married. But yeah, so when I was younger, teenage years, we would travel around, and I remember one year a friend and I went to, I think we came up with 7 or 8 different conventions, meaning we'd go to a different one every week for several months in a row. So yeah, that's kind of my life up until, I guess, high school. And then I went to college at Western Washington up in Bellingham.
Nice.
It was where my dad went to school. It's basically the same degree he got. It was the safest thing. I didn't even apply anywhere else.
What was the degree?
It was in manufacturing engineering. So
nothing that would cause you to question or learn.
Nothing at all. There's some science in there, but I had already done a pretty good job of tabling that. It's like I can do science and maybe 6,000 years, maybe 6 million. I don't know. God's time's different than ours.
Safe in the sense of how aware you were that you needed to take care of your health and like have good health insurance, and like diabetes was always on your mind. Yeah,
that was the main thing. I knew that by the time I left home, I'd have to have a good career because I needed good health insurance. So again, thinking ahead, being responsible. My goal in going to college at all was to get a job that could be a career, it could pay for health insurance, and could raise a family and give the option for my wife to stay home if that's what she chose to do. Even though my own mom actually worked part-time for all of my growing up years.
Okay.
I knew that I wanted a wife that had the option. That seemed like the best thing to do. So I went to a school that didn't have very many professing kids. It had a few, and I chose my roommate by someone knew someone who knew my family, who knew that another professing kid was going to be going to that school that year. And they contacted us and said, "Hey, you're both going to meetings. Do you guys want a room together?" And I said, "Of course, we're both professing. That's the best way to do." And so we agreed to room with each other. We went to the college dorms and lived in the same unit we lived together for a couple of years. I didn't meet him until after we'd agreed to live together, and we actually met at a church convention ahead of time. We just agreed to meet up at a church convention so that we could meet each other. So
that's wild.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to look back on now. And then I spent my 4 years in college not partying or not doing anything interesting, just going to meetings. They called me the church bus because I had a car and I would go around and pick up whatever kids were going to the school at the time that were 2x2s, which there were never more than maybe 2 or 3, I think. But I would go get them all and I would take them to the meetings. And if they weren't around, I'd go by myself. And there was a short time where there weren't actually any workers in our field. So on my Sunday afternoons, I drove about an hour down to the next field and went to their gospel meetings because it just felt like the right thing to do. So, and then it was toward the end of college that Kari and I started dating. And I guess my version of that is you and I just started talking. You were always my sister's friend, so I didn't think of you that way.
And your cousins. Yeah.
And cousin's friend, yeah. And you broke up with somebody, and I was the first person you talked to. And I was the first person he talked to as well, which is awkward.
That is really awkward.
And I said, I don't know, man, go figure that out on your own. And then you and I
But you didn't
dating.
say that to me.
Nope.
You were like, well,
him.
let me help you with that.
So yeah, I wasn't being sneaky about it. It just kind of worked out that way. Then we met up and started dating. And
Yeah, well, I went up to visit his cousin, who's still one of my best friends. She was living at home. Still, was she living at home, or was she visiting back home?
So.
But anyway, we met up at her parents' house, and Kyle drove down to their house, also his aunt and uncle. And we were all going to go to a pizza place to watch the Seahawks game. And then his cousin caught on to like the vibes that were going on. She's like, "I'm actually going to go shopping. I don't care about the game." So he and I went and watched it at this pizza place by herself. And that was our first date.
Yeah, we can watch TVs at restaurants. Just we can't have one.
Yeah.
Got it.
So yeah, we dated for 6 months, long distance, never lived together, of course. And then got engaged for 9 months, which in hindsight sounds crazy. That sounds like a quick especially being long distance that entire time.
Yeah, but we'd known each other our entire lives, and our families all knew each other, and
I think our families were both really happy that two professing kids had found each other.
Until we got engaged.
Yeah, we got engaged. I don't know. I think my parents heard that you dated a lot, and that couldn't possibly be good. So they didn't love that, but that's okay. We got married anyway.
In the Mormon world, it's really hard to behave or stay worthy in that engagement time before you get married, and sometimes engagements and marriages are rushed so you don't have sex. Similar for you guys?
I don't think we rushed it, but we did.
Theoretically, that's the idea.
Yeah.
But you got to check under the hood before you buy the car.
Right. Yeah.
Is that what most 2x2s do?
I don't know.
I don't know what most people do, to be completely honest. I think that probably not. Probably.
I'd say it's probably pretty common, but not talked about to have sex before marriage.
I think so,
but
yeah. We were.
I mean, I've never had another partner. So, like, we were good 2x2s.
For most of the engagement.
For most of the engagement,
so
we'll put it that way, yeah.
But it was a teaching that you shouldn't have sex before marriage, but you think it's actually quite common.
They're speculating.
Speculating.
Yeah, speculating because I think
a lot of people still did. Do you think?
I think so.
Is it the type of thing that people would have felt really bad about? Okay. So there was
unless
shame
they're
about it.
kind of headed out, like if they're on their way out of the church, then I don't know. But the problem with that also is because sex isn't talked about in general, there's not education on how to protect yourself and birth control and things like that. So there are occasionally teen pregnancies in the 2x2s.
Yeah, that type of stuff happens. Consent isn't talked about at all in the 2x2s because, and my theory is because they don't view it as a choice. It's, you don't do it before you're married, and then after you get married, it's a duty. So it's not viewed through the lens of consent at all. It's viewed through the lens of doing the right thing and duty, essentially.
I see.
So, but again, a lot of that stuff, it's like we mentioned in the last episode, sex is one of those things that's too far over the line. Like we don't even hardly talk about it at all, good or bad, which is unfortunate.
And similar to Mormonism, there's sex is very strictly defined. So there's like a lot of loopholes that people can use to mess around, but technically not have sex.
Mm-hmm.
So y'all do that too?
Yes. Yeah. It's not like what we've heard about soaking. That's pretty extreme what we've heard in Mormonism, but there's similar.
Is that something teens or young adults would talk about?
Like messing around, but not having sex?
Yeah.
No, it was just kind of common knowledge in the teen dating world, I think, that there were loopholes that you could get away with doing other things.
I had such a curated friend group, though, and I'm not saying that as a point of pride at all. I'm saying that as I was a little too tight-fisted with my friend group. I tended to associate with people who were very, very much rule followers. So our conversations at worst were like, "Boy, it'll be great after we're married," you know. So I would say that my experience might not have been average. My experience might have been on the extreme side of the do all the right things, follow all the rules spectrum. So that's my own personal experience.
I think there's a wide range of people who fall on all ends of the spectrum and in the middle as far as who's having sex and who's not and how far they're going, and it's just not talked about. So
yeah.
Okay. And then marrying outside the faith is probably a big no-no.
Huge. Yes. Yeah, it's a huge problem. You're very much looked down upon if you were to do that. It never
unless you
crossed
convert
my mind.
them. That's
yeah, you
great.
could convert them, but that's a lot of work. I never wanted to do that. I never even dated because I just thought, no, marriage is such a serious thing, and you're making a lifetime commitment. I never entertained the idea even once of even dating somebody who wasn't professing. So
neither did I.
Yeah. So
that's very familiar to us.
Yep.
Minus y'all don't have the eternal marriage, and we do.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because you're always paranoid about somebody pulling you away, just like I was paranoid about pulling other people away if I was a discouragement in any way or didn't uphold the standard in any way. I was also afraid of that myself. Like, I don't want to marry somebody who's questioning or who could pull me away or whatever.
For how much faith they have, they worry a lot about losing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They don't have a lot of emotion. They don't have a lot of emotions, but they have a lot of fear.
So would y'all have been married with the understanding that you would stay true to the faith till the end?
Oh, yeah.
100%. Yeah. At the time we were married, we were both severely in very much 2x2s for life, no chance of ever doing anything else. We both married very safely, but not safely in a bad way, just safely. Like we were very happy to have found somebody that we were attracted to, but also had very high standards and wanted to raise a family in this faith. If you would have told us that both of us were talk on an X podcast later, we would have been genuinely horrified. It would have terrified us.
It's to the point, the assumption of being in it forever in a marriage, to me and for us, was to the point that when we did have individual doubts or questions, or like Kyle, even before COVID started having some questions, he was listening to certain things in podcasts. He didn't tell me at first because it's scary to express that to your spouse, that you're having doubts.
Yeah, that's one of the weird things about being that much in, is you're afraid to fall out. And so we didn't even we've talked more about our beliefs before since we've left, because to do so before would be to open the door for
our communication got
bad.
So much better after we left meetings. Yeah.
So early married life, I think Kari's pretty much talked about most of it, but I think you did talk about most of it. I think we just kind of, as Kari's health got worse and things like that, I was just keep kicking till you hit shore kind of thing. I was just had my head down. I'm going to keep working, keep helping, and it'll work out somehow. And I think if I had to say there was anything on my shelf, it would be when we first started having kids and just realizing, oh, these kids are pre-wired. They have their own thing going on. I remember distinctly having a thought when our oldest was about 3 or 4 months old. I saw her do something, and I just had this fleeting thought in my head. Oh, she did that on her own. I didn't teach her that. I had this idea. We were taught growing up that the good parents with the good professing 2x2 kids, they raise them right. And if they raise them right, then the kids will never depart from the way. And they'll just do it. You just do the right thing and your kids will do the right thing. And I had that first thought of, what if they don't though? What if I'd seen it? I'd seen lots of families, good professing, go to all the meetings families, but some of their kids didn't go anymore. Some of them did, some of them didn't. Maybe some of them had gone on to different religions or become atheists or whatever. And I remember having this feeling with my first kid. My first shelf item that I remember specifically is, but what if they don't? Are you still going to love them? Well, of course. Why wouldn't I? Why would I not talk to my kids? And the thought crossed my mind, why would I treat my kids like I see a lot of people treating their own non-professing kids who've left? And I just shelved it, put that thought away.
Well, I remember even having a conversation around that time, like, what if one of our kids is gay? And I remember you saying something like, kids aren't just these empty buckets that you get to put your own ideas and beliefs and values into. They come with they're their own people. Especially when we had multiple kids and they were so different from each other.
Yeah, and that didn't seem like a profound idea, but it was to me at the time. It was, my whole life had been geared toward being responsible and doing the right thing. And then I saw my kids doing whatever they wanted when they were a few months old. They had their own little ideas. And so, yeah, I'd say that was like the first shelf item.
Well, not only did they have their own ideas, but you wanted to allow that.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like the loving thing to do would be to let them be themselves. And the idea that we were supposed to spank that out of our kids, to be completely honest, didn't sit with me at all. We were told by several people when we had young kids, you need to make sure you break their will. That type of language was very popular. Corporal punishment was a big deal in the 2x2s. I had a Wednesday night meeting in my home, and we always kept open rooms in the home, quote unquote, back rooms down the hall away from the meeting room, which was usually the living room. We would keep a few rooms down the hall in case there was a kid that was getting fussy and disrupting the meeting. The parent would take them out. And I was in a meeting one time where a kid got fussy and taken out of the room. And then another kid got fussy and taken out of the room. And then another kid got fussy, got taken out of the room. Because you need the kids to be quiet in meetings, so you can take them out. Well, there were several kids, you could hear spankings going on down the hall. And then another kid got fussy, and everybody was doing the mental math in their heads. And that fourth kid got hauled out in the front yard and spanked right in front of our house. And at the time, we laughed about that for years. And looking back at that, I've been horrified. When I started having my own kids, I wasn't laughing at that time anymore. That wasn't a funny anecdote to me anymore. It was like, oh, you punished a whole bunch of kids. You altered their internal voice before they had one, because you're telling them whatever they were doing, regardless of what it was, they're being told to be quiet, and they're very little kids. you're rewiring that at a very early age. You're not letting them be themselves on some level. And true believing, God-fearing, Jesus whatevering person, me, didn't like that. And I didn't know what to do with that feeling, so I shelved it.
I would say that was the first like really rebellious, I guess if you want to call it, thing that we did while we were still 2x2s was break that cycle of physical discipline for our children. Because even in our generation, it was very common. And I started reading and learning about gentle parenting, which is where I learned about unconditional love, and all of that made sense to me.
Yeah, having kids that could express their own identities
that was like a
important
big U-turn we took away from the 2x2 culture.
Rebelling against corporal punishment of children, basically.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think, to be fair, I think a lot of, say, millennials, older millennials like us having kids now, probably maybe felt the same way, even some that are still in. I think there was less corporal punishment in the meetings publicly as we got a little older. But when we were younger, when we were little kids, we all did this. Every little kid that grows up in the meetings plays meeting sometimes. When they're getting together, they mimic what they've seen. And they mimic by sitting around in a circle, maybe singing or something, and then hauling out a baby doll or a stuffed animal and spanking them.
Yeah, my girlfriends and I, as little kids, my friends who were girls, would take our baby dolls, and all together we had like 30 of them between the three of us or whatever, and we'd put them on a row on the couch and play meeting. And playing meeting meant each baby had its turn going out of meeting, getting spanked, or whatever else, however else we would be correcting our dolls. And we thought it was hilarious. It was almost like a virtuous thing if you were a parent and you could spank your kid loud enough that the whole meeting could hear it from the bedroom,
So that was a shelf item for us, I think. And then Kari talked last time about how we were kind of in a fog for several years, having 3 kids close together, having a lot of health issues come up, trying but not always making it out to meeting very well, not feeling particularly well supported. But then I kind of wasn't expecting it either. I was kind of like, well, they'll support us if we show up. We need to show up. And I was getting a little frustrated that we couldn't make it to the meetings and things.
Meaning you were maybe frustrated at Kari? Indirectly.
Maybe indirectly, although I never blamed her for it. I mean, it's health. What can you do? Yeah. It's just that I think I had a little bit of building frustration with I lived the right way, and it's not quite working out perfectly here. I thought we did all the right things. I thought we checked all the boxes. So that's just building a little bit in my head. Again, I didn't think of it as a shelf item, but I in looking back, I think it was. And so that kind of went on for a while. And then coming out of that, when our youngest was, I don't know, maybe 4 or so, the kids were a little older. Kari was working on her health. She hadn't got her diagnosis yet, but I think there was a period where you had done a little better. And I started realizing that my faith isn't something I can articulate very well, but my kids are going to start asking questions. Already we had this young daughter who was critiquing what she'd heard the workers say and wanted some explanations for some of this stuff. And we didn't always have good explanations. And I actually started listening to believing people versus atheist debates on YouTube.
I would have freaked out if I'd known he was listening to that.
Like Matt Dillahunty or
that type of stuff, or even old early like Hitchens versus whoever type debates and stuff. And it never affected my faith. I didn't think. Maybe it did. But at the time I was just looking for, I need to deepen my faith somehow. And we're just going to these meetings and we're saying the same thing over and over and all this stuff. But it's really important to me. I want to raise this family right. And I started listening to even Bible scholars. I don't think I got to Bart Ehrman. There was others. But, and yeah, I wouldn't have told you, I don't think. I think I mentioned it one time and you got very upset. So I was building, maybe even a little earlier than Kari, I was starting to build that kind of like trying to think critically about it to some degree.
And letting in some outside influences.
Yeah.
And this is something very familiar. When 2 faithful Mormons get married, we talk about the triangle, that there's a third. It's actually a throuple, and Jesus and the church are the third partner. But they kind of are most important. In other words, you're married to Jesus first and your partner second, or the church first and your partner second, such that you learn to hide things from your spouse if there are things that you don't believe your spouse would if you were ever close friends to begin with, which oftentimes you weren't, it's just like, whoa, I found someone who's a member who I'm attracted to and they're willing, let's get married. You don't ever become best friends to begin with. But even if you were close, as soon as you're doing something that might not be approved of, that the church or Jesus wouldn't approve of, then you're not talking about it, you're hiding it. And it can build this wedge between the couple where you're hiding things, and that can be experienced as unfaithful, and it can be really toxic to the relationship.
We were taught that same thing about the triangle, that God's at the top, and the closer you get to God, the closer you get to each other, and the farther away from God you get, the farther away you get from each other, because that's the shape of the triangle.
Wow.
Yeah.
You were literally taught that.
Yeah. It was that was the model for us. And again, I was just doing it from my own deepening of faith. I wasn't trying to, and I wasn't trying to hide it from her either. I brought it out a couple times and she was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to, I'm just working on myself here, I guess." And so we didn't talk about it that much. And
yeah, I don't think you intentionally were hiding things. I think it was more like he was concerned that he would hurt my faith if he talked about it too much, or that I might interpret it the wrong way.
Just like with that rap music you were listening to.
Yeah, back to my own faith of just, the worst thing I could think of was to offend somebody else. I mean, that's biblical, right? The worst thing you can do is offend somebody. Yeah. And I think the verse says offend a child, but we're all children of God, so we'll just use the verse that way. And
wow.
So that, I think we pulled back on spiritual talk, and also your health at that point was starting to get worse. Like we kind of went through a period where it was okay, and then
it was overwhelming.
Yeah, it was an overwhelming thing. So, and I think that's kind of where we were as we got to COVID era. COVID for me started out as a healthcare concern for me, especially or for both of us, being diabetic, getting diabetes after I'd caught a virus. I saw another virus coming, and I was like, I don't like this.
Well, and they were saying early on how diabetics were particularly high risk. Yeah.
And in Utah and Arizona and Idaho, as I understand it, there are pockets of very conservative Mormons that were anti-mask and anti-COVID vax, and were actually, their faith in the church was challenged because the prophet came out saying, wear masks and get the vaccine. And it caused a lot of people to question the truthfulness of the church, or maybe wonder if the church was falling in apostasy. Were there similar dynamics with COVID and vaccines and masks?
Yeah, 100%.
With the 2x2s?
Being taught that one thing that was special about our church was that there was unity all over the world, and then seeing COVID come along and every geographical area was handling things very differently, because in the Pacific Northwest, they had a professing doctor who was advising the workers, and they were taking very careful precautions. And then where we were, it was just like a free-for-all. And when they started meetings back up again, they were like, if anyone's concerned, there is this one meeting that has masks, and if you want to wear a mask, you can go to that one meeting. Everybody else can do, whatever they want. Like, some people are extra concerned and might want to wear a mask. There was a worker who wrote an email about the vaccine being the mark of the beast. And to be fair, he was removed from the work for a time because of that email, I think.
About a year.
Yeah, for about a year. But a lot of people believed that. You have some of this in your, and you're like, why this led, the catalyst to your own kind of faith shakeup.
Yeah, so I think that's where we are now, is kind of where we both started. We both stepped away and started essentially deconstructing. My own deconstruction, besides just trying to deepen my faith from other things, I'd also watched a few deconstruction stories, and just like Kari said, watching cult documentaries or something, I was absolutely fascinated by deconstruction stories.
Can you take us through some of the ones that grabbed you early, and then how that led to Mormon stories? Not so much because I care about Mormon stories per se, but I want to understand other people's deconstruction.
Yeah.
And how we can help with that.
Sure. Well, the first story I ever watched was a lady named Megan Phelps Roper from Westboro Baptist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You probably heard of her. Her story fascinated me because I'd also seen the Louis Theroux documentaries about Westboro Baptist. He did for the BBC, I think it was. And I was fascinated with them because they were like our group, but on speed. I identified with a lot of it, but they had a lot of extra anger. They were even smaller. They were even more isolated. And so when Megan Phelps Roper left, and then started talking about her experience, I watched it expecting to hear about this crazy cult, and we did, but also I heard some interesting things. The fact that she told her story long form, it was 2 or 3 hours. I listened to it. I listened to it several times because I thought, that's crazy. There's some identifiable things there. And I don't, honestly, to be completely honest, I don't remember exactly what those were, but I just remember thinking, they're crazy, but their women can wear pants. Are we more restrictive than a crazy cult that got a documentary? That's weird. And so that was probably around the time that I was doing the whole, listening to Bible scholars and all this stuff. And then I think I credit the algorithm because I think probably from there I ended up on Mormon Stories somehow. I don't remember specific examples of Mormon stories that resonated with me in particular, but I remember themes. I remember themes of people leaving and the narratives around them, things like, well, they never had it. They never truly had it. And stuff like that.
Things that were disparaging
about them. The way they interacted with the community as they left was really interesting to me because it sounded exactly like us. It sounded like the exact same things we say to those bitter ex-members who leave and say bad things about us.
Y'all say bitter too?
Oh, yeah.
Bitter ex-Mormon is...
Kyle and I have shirts that say bitter on them that we wear to our in-person X2x2 get-togethers.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So those types of themes, and also the concern about the model, I think, from somebody inside watching somebody leave is, oh, they just got angry, they just left, they stopped believing, they hate God and all this stuff. The narrative about the people who leave is so different from the narrative of the people who leave themselves because so many people leave reluctantly. And the stories, the things that were resonating to me, being completely inside, by the way, at this point, but my faith was, we'll talk about COVID in a second, but I remember hearing themes of like, wait, I've talked like that about people. I've called people, they're just bitter. They left, but they can't leave it alone. I've said that about people. I've probably said those exact words about friends of mine. And hearing the commonalities in all these stories, I like that you're doing this series of Never Mormons as well, because it just shows all the commonality between the groups. There's so much fear about telling your spouse that you're having any doubts, fear that you're telling your family, you're letting your family down, you're letting down this lineage, pioneer lineage for an LDS faith, or for us, it's just, we've professed for generations. We don't know how far back, not very far back, but you're letting to even question, to even look outside anything but the KJV Bible. You're showing some doubt. You're falling short a little bit. And true believing, planning on always going to meeting my entire life's me resonated with that. I remember watching and thinking, wow, that's interesting. And there was a tiny bit of empathy I had because I was like, man, they're good people though. They're not, very few people, I think a lot of people, maybe people think this about us coming on Mormon Stories, they're just coming on to tear us down. No, they're not. They're trying to tell their own story. And that was interesting to me.
I remember particularly LGBTQ themes being helpful for me because as I was deconstructing my political beliefs, I was learning to have compassion and empathy for groups of people that 2x2s do not ever consider the perspective of. So people of color and the LGBTQ community. And I was identifying with some of their stories of feeling repressed, maybe before I even could put language to that, of recognizing parts of myself in their stories. So I remember those being really impactful. And I was reading a lot of books about people leaving every type of religion, Scientology and FLDS, and just eating up. I was like a sponge, just soaking up as much information as I could get.
Kari, do you remember now, reflecting back on the first moments you may have experienced attraction to women? Did you experience that before? Did you even allow yourself to?
Yeah, my first crushes now in retrospect were on girls that I remember.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
It's a running theme through all of my childhood. I just didn't have the language for it. Like in the 2x2s, it would have been as ridiculous as saying you were attracted to a tree. Like you just don't, it's not a thing. It doesn't exist. You don't talk about it. Other than there are gay people and we kind of feel sorry for them and they have a very personal struggle. But especially bisexuality wasn't even on my radar as a thing that could exist, really.
So the Mormon Stories and other high demand religions discussing LGBTQ acceptance, not only connected with you because it was a marginalized group within your community, but it made you start wondering about yourself?
Particularly Mormon stories was where I was getting that content from. Yep.
Okay.
That was really impactful. Yeah.
Okay. Did y'all stumble on Ex-Mormon Reddit at some point?
No, I haven't done much of that. No.
Have y'all spent any time on Reddit?
Not really. I know
there is an X 2x2
Yeah, there is.
subreddit.
I've been on there and looked around a little bit. I've talked on there a little bit, but yeah, it's
we have the largest ex-religious subreddit in the world that I'm aware of. Like bigger than Catholics, bigger than Baptists, evangelicals, Jehovah's Witnesses. For some reason, Mormons just dominate. Ex-religious YouTube, ex-religious podcast, ex-religious Reddit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have some thoughts about that. Actually, we'll get to it when we talk about the end of our deconstruction, starting a group. But I think there's some reasons for that. But I think we just talk about COVID now so I'll just tell my own story. I think Kari talked about it when COVID started and everything started locking down. We locked down ourselves first. I remember I think everyone probably remembers the great toilet paper rush of March of 2020. About 2 weeks before, we'd gone out and bought extra toilet paper because we were just seeing this coming and thinking, man, if a virus gets going crazy in the country, this is not good for us. But I thought, there's very few things that bring a lot of people together. And one of those is sports. And another one is tragedy. And this virus looks like it could be a tragic thing. Hopefully we all bring ourselves together. Hopefully we all just put differences aside and try to do the right thing, try to help each other out. And what felt like the right thing for me to do at the time was for us to not go to meetings for a little bit and not go into a small room where we're all sharing emblems out of the same cup and singing and all this stuff. So we stopped going. And I realized that I think when my face started really cracking was realizing that we were very much alone in thinking that. A lot of the group we were from, the 2x2s, didn't feel that way. They felt like, well, this is just another worldly thing. Don't get caught up in the hype. Just keep going to meetings.
Faith over fear.
Don't have fear. I mean, they're fearful of everything all the time, but don't fear this. They tend to be fearful of things they can't see, but they're not fearful of this. And that hit me really hard because I was taking it very seriously. I'm thinking, we don't know what this virus does. At the time, we didn't know anything about it. This could be really bad for a family with health problems. I'm the sole breadwinner. I need to keep it together here. And then hearing even from the ministers, at the time when things shut down, they were doing a lot more call-in meetings. We could call in the ministers and speak into the phone. And we were hearing real, in my opinion, craziness about, well, this is just some worldly problem. This is just the world trying to shut us down. And they were processing it all as persecution in a way. And I thought, that doesn't make sense at all. I hadn't foreseen that. I hadn't foreseen that way of processing the information. And early on, I think before COVID even came to the U.S., I called someone in the 2x2s, and I told them my concerns. I said, this is kind of a scary thing. What do you guys think you're going to do? We're probably going to do whatever. And they responded by telling me a bunch of conspiracy theories that were detached from any reality in my mind. And
that's when we learned about QAnon.
We learned about QAnon accidentally because I think this person I was talking to had kind of gone down that rabbit hole.
A lot of the 2x2s were into QAnon. Not all of them, but a lot of them were.
And I hung up the phone and I went to Kari and I was like, you won't believe this conversation I just had. This is the wildest thing. And so I don't want to paint with too broad a brush and say everybody in the 2x2s is completely crazy. That's not true. There's the widest spectrum. But what really cracked my faith, and ultimately I think was the last thing on the shelf, was just seeing a lack of care around people the elderly and the people who have health issues and things like that. And I will never fault anybody for getting something wrong about COVID or, not taking a vaccine or whatever. Those are all personal choices. But the narrative about the narrative that we shouldn't fear a thing that's very real and tangible to us, that was confusing to me, right up to the point of we actually know someone who died, someone who passed away very early on, who had a kid our age. This person was about my age. They passed away. Their spouse was in the ICU, and their kid had to go live with grandparents from COVID. And people within the 2x2s kind of was like, well, we're just going to keep having meetings. They got sick. We don't really know what happened. And I thought, man, there's a gigantic disconnect between our faith and reality right now.
They weren't even using the word COVID in general. We were hearing of elderly people passing away, and this lady we knew passed away, and they weren't calling it COVID. It was like they were pretending it didn't exist.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush and say everybody lost their minds, but enough people were saying things that there was a real the faith butted up against something and needed to reckon with it. And in my mind, it wasn't doing it. It was making people worse judges of what to do than better. And to get to meeting, I had to get around my faith to get there. Faith wasn't helping me deal with this crisis. Faith was giving me a lot of stuff I had to work around to keep my family safe. And I know that many people, I've heard on Mormon stories, many people have left their faith when they realized, hey, they're shutting down. Why would you do that? We're a faith-based community. Those people are in the 2x2s as well. It was the opposite for us. It was like, why shouldn't we have some faith, pull back, let God's faith, let God put faith in us to continue our faith forward, even if we can't meet together, and we'll meet up on the other side. And instead there was a narrative of, if we don't meet together, the faith's going to go away, essentially. You're going to lose out. Someone even told me on the phone, I had a family member tell me, this is COVID's bad because it's going to keep you away from meetings. It's going to cause spouses to divorce. It's going to process it as essentially COVID was somehow persecuting all of us in our faith. And that's a condensed version of me losing my faith, essentially, is realizing that it just didn't pour into the real world.
We got an email after meetings opened up again, and we voluntarily had stayed away for several more months past what everybody else was doing. We got an email from a worker in our field at the time who was talking about how God is the one in Deuteronomy who put the plague on people's houses. So it's really up to God who gets sick and who doesn't. And it's not up to us to worry about if we're passing something on to other people, because it's up to God to choose who gets sick and who doesn't get sick. And so just no accountability, no responsibility. And that it's very important to physically be in that place of meeting and to have your kids in meeting. And it was very clear to us that our presence in meeting was valued more than our lives in a very literal way. And we also have children with chronic illnesses. So that was insane to us. Like, there was no way we were going to sacrifice one of their parents or their own health to have them physically in meeting. It just didn't make sense to us.
Yeah, it was very evident to me that this thing I'd grown up with taking such good care of in my life called the truth, the first time it gets tested, I feel like, it didn't survive that test. It was lacking in something, and I was looking for help outside of it because I wasn't getting help from my faith at that time. And long story short, that letter that Kari's talking about, she read it to me on the phone, and that was the first time I said, we're not going back. This is not a responsible group. My faith, I had faith to believe in things that I couldn't see. I believed in God. I can't see God, but I have faith in him. My faith doesn't disregard things I can see. And I felt like the 2x2 faith was struggling so much to deal with just a normal real world problem. Viruses happen. And they were struggling so much to just trying to keep people from walking away. They were afraid that if people walked away, they wouldn't come back. Well, that's interesting, right? It means you have to stay there. You have to stay in to have any connection with God. And that was not, I realized that my faith, as it was to me, was so personalized that it actually didn't match the 2x2s anymore. So.
And then I told you I was an atheist.
Yeah, how was that conversation?
Ooh.
You want to tell us about that?
That was a really, really difficult 6 months.
Were you afraid he'd leave you when you told him?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, tell us that story.
Yeah.
Again, like I mentioned briefly in the last episode before we stopped, it didn't feel like a choice. It didn't feel like I woke up one day and was like, I want to be an atheist. That's not what it felt like. It felt like this realization that I just didn't believe anymore. And I could try forcing myself, but I just didn't. I went through the whole gamut. I was like, do I still believe in hell? Am I dragging my kids to hell if I'm an atheist? I was under the impression that a marriage in the 2x2s that was built on 2x2 faith would not survive two different beliefs. So I thought I was ruining my marriage. Like, this wasn't something that I wanted or that I had sought out. And the more I accepted it in myself, I thought I might lose my peace. I will never experience joy again. These were feelings that you feel as a 2x2 because you have God. But with some time, I realized I was still capable of this full range of human experience of having joy and peace. And there were things about it that were comforting to me, like the randomness of suffering. So these were things I was starting to accept about myself.
Can I ask a question? So you may have mentioned it in the previous episode, but just for the sake of containment in this episode. The main reasons you lost your faith in God, or that you can think back and say, these were the main reasons God died for me, were what?
Allowing myself access to information that had been withheld from me in the church and just educating myself, reading information, reading books, and that's how it hit me.
And the big ones were what?
Bart Ehrman was a big one who I'd heard about on Mormon Stories podcast.
So like a flawed Bible, flawed New Testament? Is that
right? Yes.
Okay.
Because for me, the Bible as a 2x2 had always been very true. Everything in it was true. It was not metaphorical unless Jesus said it was a parable. So it was literal and true. And once the contradictions in the Bible were pointed out to me, and I don't know, you would call them anachronisms or just things that didn't add up, didn't make sense, it all fell apart for me. And also just being a parent this idea had started to accumulate of, if God is a loving parent, and I understand how that feels now as a parent, I would never punish my children or make them suffer, especially not for all eternity. But like coming from this, I had, recently been educating myself about gentle parenting, and we weren't using corporal punishment. So punishment itself didn't make sense to me. This like reward and punishment binary system of a higher power that we had been taught, it just wasn't adding up for me anymore. So that was the God that I had been taught as a 2x2. And I did do some research into other theologies and how other people learned about God. And 2x2s are very works-based. Like, we weren't ever really taught about grace, other than it's sort of synonymous with forgiveness. So I learned about grace, and I learned about the Trinity, and I had an open mind to these other ideas, but it just didn't fit for me.
So I mentioned a lot that my Christian listeners are super mad at the Mormon Church for killing not just, belief in Mormonism, but also in God and Jesus. Why didn't you just go to there's a couple questions. Why didn't you just go to like liberal Christian, which is like, it's myth, it's metaphor, it's good moral principles, or some other Christian tradition, or not Christian, but still believing in God, but just not Christianity, the Christian God. You could make a God that felt right to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I thought about that. So with my deconstruction, first of all, I had to take everything down to the bare bones of what I had been taught. I had to deconstruct everything that I had been taught about the 2x2s and belief and God and Jesus and everything, and then rebuild from there. And when it came to the rebuilding process, as I was learning about all these different theologies and different ideas and different religions and different viewpoints and different beliefs, and all of these opportunities opened up of what I could adopt as my own belief, I just realized I didn't need it. I realized that I had been seeking external validation my entire life for proving that I'm a good person, that I'm a moral person, that I'm okay, that I'm an acceptable human. The idea that had to come from outside of myself, from whether that's a higher power or the 2x2s or the workers or even parents, it felt unhealthy for me. For my own healing and my own reconstruction, I needed to accept myself as a moral, good enough human the way that I was, and build on that, on my own internal validation. So for me, externalizing that wasn't healthy anymore. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So you just kind of lost interest in external sources of authority.
Right. And once I realized I can still feel the full range of peace and joy by looking at a sunset that I believe came about naturally, not through a higher power, then I just didn't need to look outside of myself for those feelings. And on top of that, a lot of these books I was reading were talking about the problem of suffering, and if there's a loving creator, why in nature does a baby antelope have to be played with by the lion for so long before it's killed? And why are babies getting cancer and suffering horrifically before they can even talk? All of that stuff, it felt more kind and comfortable to believe that those things were random And on top of that, if you don't believe in unicorns, it's really hard to force yourself to believe in unicorns. And that's how I felt about a higher power at that point. I thought I could fake it till I make it, maybe, and like eventually might change my mind. But it just felt like too much work when I realized that what I was building internally was okay for me.
I'm seeing Margie's head nod quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Are you vibing with this, Margie?
No, I'm
just
understanding
vibing.
it for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So you had to, do you remember like a day you had to like have the conversation with him?
I do remember. I remember the date.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the end of November. And
What year? 2020?
2020.
Okay.
I just kind of blurted it out to Kyle. Like it almost felt like this exciting new discovery about myself with a lot of potentials. And it was scary, but it was like, there's this whole new world opening up to me. I think I'm an atheist. And the reaction I got was intense betrayal. It was as if I had told him that I had had an affair. The hurt was so deep, and I wasn't expecting that. Like it made sense to me once I realized it. And I definitely could have broached the topic in a more gentle, maybe toned down my excitement kind of way.
Oh, wait, not a celebration.
But you were excited about your own discoveries, it sounds
And
like.
it felt like a celebration. It sounds like it felt like
It did. I had
and maybe one of
internalized a lot of what I was presenting to Kyle. And this is my fault too. I tend to do this. I tend to internalize new ideas that I have and really work them from every angle before I come out and present them to Kyle. So I had already worked through a lot of like the potential scary parts and the problematic parts in my head and come to the place where I was excited, and this was like a new discovery of mine. And it completely shocked him, I think.
I think just really quickly, like noticing that this is a moment where actually you are connecting with yourself and you are doing this new process of, how do I feel about this? I don't know. I think it does feel like empowering. It does feel like a coming to, or
growing up as a 2x2 girl and not being allowed to explore your identity and your autonomy and your independence. It felt like the first time I was doing that. Like I was choosing a value for myself rather than inheriting it or having it handed to me.
And I think that's one of the hardest situations to be in sometimes when you're in relationship with someone. When the thing that frees you or the thing that actually, liberates you hurts your spouse.
Yeah, it was incredibly difficult and very confusing, and his hurt me. And yeah, it was a really, really tough time. That 6 months was just for both of us incredibly dark. I was suicidal a couple of times. I thought my existence is hurting people that I love. I also have my 2x2 family that's hurting because I told them that I wasn't going back to the church around that time. So it was a really, really dark, difficult time. Yeah. And you can speak to what you were going through during that time too, because I think it was
How was that for you, Kyle?
Yeah, it was terrible. Yeah, she described it very well because that was my viewpoint on it. She's steel manned my viewpoint very well. It was a chaotic time anyway, but we've mentioned before that just based the system we grew up in, we tended to not talk about things that really mattered. And we thought we were close. We've always been close. We've been very good friends. We're very lucky in that way. We didn't just pick each other out of, because we fit the criteria. We are actually really good friends too. And so when she said that, it came out of nowhere. And I immediately thought, we haven't even talked about this. And that's what felt like a betrayal to me, is that she'd been doing work on her own on the side. I had too, to be completely fair. But, in the past that I'd talked about some things that maybe were outside the norm, I had talked to her about it and we'd had these discussions and she told me to not do that anymore. And now this, and it did feel like a betrayal. It felt like, how in the world did we get here? We had this all planned out exactly right. We had the good family. We had, 2.3 or so kids. We had dogs in a minivan, and we were professing and I had a good job. We checked all the boxes. And now in the middle of this, we're disconnected. And I had the same dark period of my life, to be completely honest. It was I don't want to misuse psychological terms or anything, but I was depressed for a couple of months. And it was not just, I don't want to simplify it down to, I was depressed that Kari was now not believing. That it wasn't that. It was, I was depressed that my entire worldview didn't work. The worldview that I had spent 30 some years putting together and curating carefully and making sure not to offend anybody and raising a family with these values and sacrificing any time I needed to make sure that this belief system continued on through me and around me. And now it's not. And I was despondent for a while. And it was dark because it's weird to describe now, because when you say it out loud, it's like, really, you got that depressed about it? But I had a hard time. I would wake up in the morning for a while like, I wish I hadn't woken up. I don't want to be up today. Sleep was better. And I was constantly, it was like the only thing running on my brain. I'd go to work and I could concentrate on work. That was a break for me to go to work. And then I'd come home and I'm like, okay, back to the black cloud. Like, it's not just that I felt like I had failed somehow.
He would call me on his lunch break from work because he has done that our entire marriage, and he would just be crying. And like his whole lunch break would just be him not able to talk, just sobbing on the phone. Yeah,
we had a lot of arguments, and we would try to have good conversations and we couldn't do it. We were just too disconnected. Mm-hmm. And neither of us wanted that, to be clear. Like we didn't want to be disconnected from each other, but we were. And I was realizing that was the only connection I had. I wasn't that connected to the church anymore. My beliefs aside, my beliefs were part of it for sure. But there's a version of me with my kind of loosey-goosey beliefs where I could allow for a little bit of gray area when I needed to, worked really well to keep a family together and to be a good example of my own family name and all this stuff. And now what it felt like was outside of my control is that was gone. And so I wasn't having the freeing feeling of like, I can start over. I was having the feeling of like, oh, I just ran off a cliff accidentally. The analogy I've used is back in those old like Warner Brothers cartoons or something, you see the character running around, he'll run off a cliff and he'll just keep running for a while.
It's Wile E. Coyote.
Yeah, the Wile E. Coyote thing. And there's a moment in all of those cartoons where they'll stop and look at the camera and blink a few times in midair and think, and you can tell they're looking at the audience thinking, this could go a lot of different ways. I could turn around and run back to the coast or to the cliff, but I was running from that, so I shouldn't do that. I can fall and put a big character-sized hole in the ground, or I could build some sort of aircraft on the way down or something. That pause, stare at the camera, blink, fear, I was there for months of just like frozen in place, like I don't know what to do. Nothing prepared me for any disjoint in belief at all. And I knew that I use that analogy because running off the cliff also implies that you could run back. And I knew I couldn't do that. Meetings, I was checked out of meetings at this point. Kind of. I hadn't told anybody, but I knew mentally I'm not a 2x2 anymore. Clearly, my values don't align with them. And my deconstruction had progressed to that point, I think. But we weren't seeing eye to eye on anything. And I felt completely just in the dark.
I think we were both kind of reacting from a place of fear and concern. Like I knew I was constantly worried that like, now he knows I'm an atheist, he's not going to want to stay married to me because he's still a believer. So this place of fear of like not being accepted, not being wanted, it's not going to work out. It wasn't that we didn't want it to work. It was just like we were so quickly flooded and so quickly in this reactionary state with each other that it was so difficult to communicate. And it was during that time, at some point, Kyle came to me and he was like, I found this podcast and Mormon stories, and I want you to listen to this episode because it explains what I'm going through. And I said, I found Mormon stories and I already listened to that episode. And we started communicating through these guests that you had on your show.
Like avatars.
Like, hey, this one episode where this guest said this, that's how I'm feeling. And it was like we were able to use Mormon stories to start reconnecting and communicating. It was like the only thing we had in common for a while.
Yeah, there was a short time where we kind of communicated through by holding up the doll that is the Mormon Stories guest, because there was relatable stuff on all sides. There was, families that had differing faith and stuff like that. And that was a common point for us, I think.
And you don't remember what that first episode was?
I wish I did. I wish I did.
That's fine.
There were just so many. I mean, we were binging it back.
Did y'all have any idea who Mormons were, what they believed?
A little bit.
Yeah.
So
Before you started, like,
Yeah.
yeah, actually,
were we Amish to you? Were we Mennonites to you?
No, I only had good feelings about Mormons. So there was actually a ward in my local town. I grew up in a small town, but that town had a ward with a lot of kids. I had a lot of kids that I went to school with who were LDS, and they were fine. I didn't know anything about the beliefs other than they had some polygamy in their past and something about Moroni, and not much else. We actually had a minister. Our workers love to talk down about other religions, and one of our ministers, it's come up a couple times, like those Mormons with their copyrighted materials. We don't copyright anything. We just have the Bible. And we actually had one minister who brought up Moroni one time and referred to him as Moroni baloney, just as a way, just to be disparaging, just offhanded disparagement. So I knew about them, but they were just kind of like everything. Oh, some people are Mormon, some people are Catholic, whatever.
I actually wrote down that quote from an overseer, and he said this in 1968. So this was before we were born, but we grew up with this idea about Mormons. He says, I was looking at a Book of Mormon, and on the first page it says it is copyrighted. Do you say that is an inspired book? They will never let anyone see the book unless they pay for it. Which isn't true.
Which isn't true. I've had people offer me books of Mormon before, but.
And then, recently I was asking.
By the way, did y'all know Joseph Smith tried to sell the copyright and wasn't able to? Yeah. He was like broke and needed money. And he received a prophecy that if he sent some of his followers to Canada or whatever, they'd be able to sell the copyright. So he sent them to Canada and they weren't able to sell it.
That's really funny.
Anyway.
But no, my impressions of LDS members, even to this day, they're just really good people. They're nice people.
We are
great coworkers.
Aren't we amazing?
I did not grow up around Mormons, and I thought they were a cult because we basically were taught every other religion is a cult. Before coming on here, I sourced our support group for any ex-2x2s who had stories about Utah specifically. And someone mentioned, and I found a workers list, and this story was on the bottom of it. But basically, there's a legend that workers told that in the 1930s, they came to Utah to preach the gospel, and they had set up a tent, and the Mormons came and burned their tent down. So Utah is not very friendly to the 2x2s, and that's why they never put like a lot of energy into it. I think there's like 1 to 200 2x2s in Utah. There's one field.
Very small.
Mm-hmm. It's a small population.
I mean,
How many 2x2s?
About
Only
1 to
a
200.
couple hundred at most, yeah. Which
There's
is
one
small.
field.
There's
And if
one-
you're watching, if you're a Utah 2x2, reach out to me. And you can come on the podcast and tell us why these people are really bad people and totally wrong and misrepresenting your faith.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm sure they'll do it, right? I'm sure they're watching, right?
Who knows? Maybe. You never know. We were.
But they don't think of
We were
themselves as
2x2s when we were
2x2s.
listening.
No, they're probably watching thinking, who are these people? They're not the 2x2s. We're the truth.
That'll be wild when somebody says, yeah, I was a 2x2, but I didn't call myself that. And I was curious about this weird church called the 2x2s. So then I started learning
that's
about them. And
I have no
I
doubt
realized
that's
that was
happened.
us.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that's happened at some point.
Anyway, so you thought Mormons. Do you think that story's true, that Mormons burned down their tent? Or do you think
I
that
don't
was just
know.
folklore?
Again, workers love persecution stories, so it's just hard to know. I don't really know.
Yeah. Who knows?
Another thing that we started realizing that I want to like bring out as we were deconstructing was we started realizing the community of support that had been consistent through everything we had been through was our already ex-2x2 friends, like Mike and Abby, and another friend who lived with us for a while, were our friends when they left the church and we were still 2x2s. And then when we were leaving the church, they were there for us and supporting us. More so than any 2x2 friends we had had, these ex-members who were supposedly bitter and angry were consistently there for us and supporting
And never told us to leave either. No one ever tried to talk us out of going. They just were there for us to talk to. So, but I didn't even, during my faith crisis, I didn't even talk to them because I knew they were going to, I thought they were probably going to tell me to leave, and I didn't want that. But I knew the people inside were going to tell me to stay, and I didn't really want that. And I wasn't getting along with Kari. I mean, we were getting along, but like the important parts of our conversations weren't happening. And I got into a really dark place too. And I remember driving to work one day in December, I think we decided. I can't remember the dates on this stuff, but I was driving to work, and in the darkest place, I remember thinking, maybe this is hell. maybe losing all purpose and all meaning, and realizing you don't have a single person to look out to ask, to talk to, because every single person's going to have an agenda in your life. That's not true, but that's how I felt at the time. And I was driving to work, and I just thought, I failed completely. 30 some years, I completely failed. And I have 3 kids now. Those are souls. We talk about all the time about it's better for you. They warn the people inside. The workers warn the people inside. If you leave, that's even worse for you. People who know and leave are way worse off in eternity than people who never knew it in the first place. I brought my kids into this. I have this whole family. Something I did failed. I didn't even blame Kari for her beliefs. I was like, well, she can't help that clearly. But could I have helped it? I'm supposed to take care of things. I'm the one holding things together. I'm the responsible person here. I can't cause someone else to stumble. Never occurred to me that somebody else might cause anything for me. I just kept myself away from people that could. And I was driving to work one day, and I thought, maybe I shouldn't be here. And the time period I'm talking about was about a second and a half probably, but it felt like 1,000 years. There's like a before and after to it, because I was driving and I thought, I don't have to get to work today. Like maybe I'm just better off not here. Maybe the kids will be better off. Kari will find somebody else. The kids, they're growing up in a household of somebody who lost it. I had it and I lost it. Kari had it and she lost it. Maybe they'd be better off without me around. And it was the darkest feeling I could possibly imagine. And I thought, this might be how hell feels, and that might be where I'm going. But I'm going to keep driving. And so I kept driving and got to work that day. And I made a decision that day that I'm going to figure it out too. I think that's where, when Kari talked about like, I can think of my own values and come into your new self. I made a decision to do that, because the other decision, at that time, I was like, I might be sending a whole family to hell with just not taking care of the beliefs I was given. And I don't believe them. That's the problem. It's not that I believe really hard and am disappointed that we're all not going there. I also don't really have it. I've kind of lost the revelation. This is a mess. But I should stay. And I've never felt like that since. I never felt like that before. I've never felt like that since. But I did hit a rock bottom just driving my car down the freeway at 4:30 in the morning. And the before and afters to that, I didn't come out of that thinking, okay, now I'm past it. I'm good. I don't believe anymore. I'm not going to go to the meetings. I still wasn't sure. I threatened Kari a couple times with maybe taking the kids to those meetings anyway, just out of spite. But I didn't really believe it. And from then on, it was a matter of, okay, well then what do we do now? What is that all? Everything I put my effort into in the first 30 some odd years of my life, that wasn't it.
That was a big realization moment for me when I realized, if it's so hard to leave this religion, that death or suicide seems like a reasonable way out.
Preferable.
It's a cult. Like, that was a big, profound moment for me where I accepted that term. You asked about that earlier, and as we're talking about this, that memory comes back to me, because that is not how leaving a healthy religion should feel like. That's not a healthy, whether you feel comfortable using the word cult or not, that is not a healthy religion if leaving makes you consider suicide.
Yeah, I felt the same thing. Even in that moment, I thought, the fact that I'm even here feeling this right now is because I'm giving too much weight to something that's not giving me anything back. When I really, really need something to lean on, there's nothing there. And that's not my fault. I can't say I was a doubting person that was always sinning all the time. All the things that you would say about somebody who left, like, oh, they never really had it. I did really have it. I based my life around it. And when I felt that it wasn't for me anymore, the fact that I would feel that, like, wow, my life on some level has ended and there's going to be a new life after this, that's a bit ridiculous. And I knew it at the time. And so
it was like, it was hard to imagine existing outside of that, of 2x2ism. Like, we couldn't picture what life outside would even look like. It's too hard to imagine. It was easier to imagine us just disappearing from life altogether. Yeah,
I think it's probably similar to the LDS faith. It's not what you do, it's who you are on a molecular level. It's, you don't have language prior to what you learned. So
it's your identity, it's your marriage, it's your family relationships, it's your community, It's your worldview.
And the more you've curated that over time, like both of us had, the more that was true.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of stepping off. We were realizing I'm off that cliff looking at the camera going, wait, where do I go? I'm going to have to build something on the way down. And so that's kind of what we did next.
Yeah. We tried some couples therapy for a while. It really stirred the pot and didn't help much at that time. So I went into individual therapy, which was more helpful. And we just spent the next year really, like COVID was going on still, and we were just processing a lot, learning a lot. We started working more on our communication. I told Kyle that I was bisexual in 2022. And that was a really healing experience for us because I was a little scared that it would be a repeat of the atheist conversation, and it was not. Kyle was surprised, but immediately accepting and warm and loving and like fully on board with this part of my identity. And that was really healing for both of us to like be able to repeat that conversation in a way that, I don't know how to explain that. It was just very healing.
It's kind of like you had done some becoming, you had done some work. And so it sounds like it allows you enough of a similar situation to see the growth together you had made.
Yeah, and I was a little more aware of like how to present it and to be aware of like the impact it could have on him. But he was just immediately so supportive and loving and accepting. And I came out to my kids who were like, cool, whatever, no big deal. Like, which also speaks to sort of how the culture was already changing in our house around topics like LGBTQ issues, and that they were just immediately like, that's cool, Mom, shrug. Like, whatever.
Kyle, I'm wondering what kept you from feeling insecure or afraid, threatened by her coming out as bisexual, that maybe she might want to love other people.
Yeah, well, bisexual means she likes more than one, and I'm one of the genders, so it works out.
There was a little bit of, I had to reassure him a little bit as far as like, but you're still into me, right? Like, yeah, of course I'm still into you.
Yeah, I guess I just wasn't that threatened by it. I think honestly...
And our communication had improved to the point that we could have those conversations of like, I love that you're telling me this, but like I'm a little nervous about this or I'm a little worried about this. And then we were able to talk through it.
Yeah, I think that we've compressed a lot here. We've compressed like a year, but in that time we both committed individually to let's work on ourselves, figure out what's valuable to us. We know we're valuable to each other, so let's do what we didn't do before. Let's talk about all of our values. Let's talk about everything that's important to us. Let's just put it on the table and talk about it. And if it's uncomfortable, that's okay. But it's not a threat. I think we'd processed, while we were we processed any sort of deep conversation as a threat to the stability of us. At this point, we'd both been through feeling suicidal at that point. And it's like, well, we're both still here. Let's do this. This is, we want to be friends. We want to do this for each other, for ourselves and for each other. We love our family. We don't want something outside of us to break that up. And so everything on the table, we've had a lot of really honest conversations that we wouldn't have had before, which is crazy to think that being in a church made us less honest in a way. And maybe honesty isn't the right word. Maybe it's just authentic. We weren't that authentic. Yeah. And so that was just something we decided to do, and it's been good.
Yeah, and on some other podcasts, I've come out about my bisexuality, and in the comments, people have said things like, poor Kyle, did you see his face? And like, as if I was coming out to Kyle on a podcast.
Like I didn't know.
So do you want to speak to that in case we get any of those people?
I already kind of said that. Like it doesn't, I'm one of the genders. You still like me, so.
Well, I didn't come out to Kyle on a podcast. It was a private conversation. He's fully supportive of my sexuality.
You used all your new communication tools.
Yes.
Well, I think the fear isn't that she necessarily won't be attracted to you. It's that she'll feel a desire or need to explore with other partners too.
Yeah, it's that kind of gets into the whole every conversation's on the table, and that's just like, I think that we just decided that's more healthy. We've had to reevaluate all of our values, and now it's more of a negotiated space than it was before. We didn't grow up with negotiated values. We grew up with values that were given to us and told they were holy. And now it's like, well, holy is an operative phrase, I guess. Mostly we just need to talk what is valuable for our family.
And learning that marriage isn't a union where you lose your autonomy to join and become one person.
Right.
That it's two people with sometimes different ideas and different needs in a relationship, communicating and working those things out in a way that is mutually beneficial to each individual and to the relationship as a whole. Whereas 2x2s teach that when you get married, you're basically setting aside your identity and becoming one with this person, especially the wife, right? Submitting to your husband. And seeing Kyle and both of us growing individually in a way that we could come to the table with all of our fears, all of our concerns, all of our needs, all of our desires to be fully autonomous people and to explore whatever sides of our identity we need and want to explore, and being willing to have those open conversations. That's a lot of work and a lot of growth, and has also been really awesome. Like, I don't know. I think it has really strengthened our marriage.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. And I don't think you mentioned it, but I also went and it was a long time after Kari started, but I went and started getting my own counseling too. And I went to therapy. I'm not actually going to one right now, but for about 2.5 years, I went to a therapist
just
on my
because
own.
she moved. So sadly you lost your therapist.
Yeah, I did lose my therapist, but that's okay. But I just felt like I needed a third party to talk to someone how I was feeling and stuff like that. So I think that we just have decided to grow. Like that's the best way to put it. And I think that it's weird to think I think we were talking before the show, but about autonomy and the idea that I can go choose to do this thing. I can go choose to grow. That's kind of a foreign concept when you're raised in a high control group. You do what reinforces the group. Well, we don't have a group, so necessarily. So we have to take that responsibility on ourselves. And I guess that maybe feeds back to my feeling responsible, but now I'm responsible for myself. And that I think we can meet together on that. And I think it works really well.
Yeah. And speaking of autonomy, one of the things I did during this time, it was, I think early 2022, maybe January, was I went and got my ears pierced. That was easily one of the top 10 best days of my life.
Wow.
Like, I can't describe the feeling of what it was like, how freeing it was to be able to choose to put holes in my own ears. Like, it sounds like such a simple thing, but that had never been allowed. And it just represented so much to me of how far we had come.
Well, the Mormon female equivalent of that, can you guess what it is?
The second piercing.
Or shoulders.
What?
Or shoulders, like showing shoulders.
Porn shoulders is one. When a woman, tell me, Margie, if I'm wrong, when a woman wears a tank top, but also when you take off your garments and wear just normal underwear.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a rite of passage almost.
Like an ex-Mormon.
Probably very similar feeling.
So for you, it was piercing ears. That's awesome.
I hadn't thought of that connection, but
It was a great day. Yeah. I had a couple friends go with me, and we all went out to dinner to celebrate after, and it was really, really awesome.
Yeah.
That's fun.
So after that,
moving on to like our support group and kind of the craziness that came after.
You didn't just heal and ride off into the sunset. You decided to try and provide community for other people, right? And support.
Yeah. So the beginning of 2022, I went to Kyle and I was like, I've been thinking of how difficult it was for us to leave without community and without support. And like, the 2x2s preach that leaving is the easy way out, but it was so hard and so difficult. I thought there was something wrong with me. And maybe there's like 50 other people out there feeling the same way. I was thinking about starting a Facebook support group, and Kyle was a little hesitant for reasons that maybe he can explain. But I also brought the idea the same day to our friends Mike and Abby. And they were like immediately on board. They were like, oh, yes. I think Mike had even said he had thought about doing it before, but I was like, do you guys want to start this group with us? Like, let's all the four of us work together really well. We've been friends for a long time. Mike and Kyle actually roomed together briefly in your first years of college or something. Anyway, so yeah, they were like super on board, and Kyle's like kind of hesitantly, but on board. So we started the support group, and
that was a Facebook group.
Yeah.
And he called it
the X2x2 support group.
Okay.
The X-2X2.
And we purposefully chose the term 2x2 to be in the name because there weren't any other support groups that were using that name. And we were like, it can be a really healing and powerful thing to, like we were talking about earlier, Margie, to have language to call something what it is. And these are 2x2s. So let's use the term and put it out there. And we knew the growth would mostly be word of mouth in the beginning anyway. So we started the group, and the first year it grew to about 700 members, right?
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, we thought, I was pretty optimistic that it would grow, which is why I wasn't sure I wanted to do it. I was like, man, this sounds like a full-time job. And also, I don't want to be defined as an ex. I don't want to be a bitter ex my whole life. I'd rather think of what I'm going toward and build a group around that.
I see that.
But
what will family think who's still in?
Yeah, so I should back up just a second. And right before that, I did tell my family. I hadn't told my family. It was a year and a half between the last meeting I went to and telling my immediate family, because I knew that I was breaking a chain that would be very hard for them to deal with, and disappointing them. You know, the family name is ruining the family name on some level. And I thought, man, it's one thing to leave and the heartache that comes with that, disappointing so many people. But also now to start a group and be an administrator of an ex community seems like a lot. It seems like I'm really being a stereotype of an ex-member here. And at first I was a little hesitant to do it, but then I thought, no, we need it though. There were groups online. There were some web pages out there that talked about history. There were even a few Facebook groups. But a lot of them had used terms like, the groups were called things like truth, the way, they string a bunch of things together. Anytime you talk to an X2x2, a lot of times they'll just string a bunch of, we were part of the truth or the way, or the saints and servants and all this stuff. And we were like, we need to simplify it down, just SEO, good SEO. But also I thought, man, if we did it, I think it could be successful, because I think given our experience that we were just coming out of such a dark time, maybe we could help some people.
Well, and we really wanted to establish a community, and all four of us had this commonality, and the goals, the vision that we had for the group was an inclusive, accepting place, that it didn't matter what your beliefs were now. We wanted to be a safe place for the LGBTQ community, and that really hadn't been done before.
And a safe place for believers. I just joined your Facebook group, and it tells you, hey, there are believers and non-believers in this group.
Yeah.
So
we don't allow proselytizing in there, because we've all experienced enough of that. But no proselytizing, and we're pro LGBTQ. And those are kind of our two.
Those are in the rules. Yeah.
Those are the two of the rules. But also, this is where I want to hat tip to Mormon Stories. I'd watched Mormon Stories for long enough now to realize that, in my view, and I don't know how you view Mormon Stories, but to me, Mormon Stories was a hub where I found a lot of other things. Everything from Sandra Tanner, historical stuff, people who'd been ex for a long time and had a lot of history. That stuff is amazing to me. I don't even understand the history, but I love listening to those episodes.
You like Sandra Tanner?
Yeah, I love Sandra Tanner episodes. And Mike, I think his name, who wrote the book, and you did all those episodes.
LDS discussions.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And then there's all these younger, I almost said kids, they're adults, all these YouTube channels of people.
Nemo and Alyssa Grenfell.
Alyssa Grenfell, Exmolex, Zelf. I know I'm going to forget some, but I think it's really cool, because when I was thinking about our support group, I was thinking, well, Mormon Stories has all these people on. They have a place that they can go. And if Mormon Stories isn't clicking for somebody, but they can go follow Sandra Tanner to learn history, or they can go follow, fun commentary by Zelf on the Shelf or something, RFM or something, like all of these different channels. There's so many different places. Mormon Stories is the hub with all of these spokes, and it ties everything together so well. Why don't we do that? That, for me personally, I think all four of us who run the group each maybe have a little bit different idea of what we want out of the group, but that, for me, that is the idea. That's why I decided I'm going to do it, and I want to do it really well, because I want people, no matter who they are, to be able to come in, and even if they don't find it in our group, they can head off on one of the spokes of the wheel out to some place.
And there have been spokes that have come from it. There is now an LGBTQ specific X2x2 support group, and a Christian specific one, and an atheist specific one. So there has been all these little spokes that have come off for more support, more explicitly, for whatever your need is.
I think that some of those I think the Christian one, and maybe there might have been one or two others that predated ours as well, but it's helped them too. What's that?
The Christian one was before ours.
I think it predated ours.
That could be.
But tying it all together into a kind of a hub for all that, a hub for the network, I think really helped where we're going to go with the story in a second.
So then, in summer 2022, an overseer, a very well-known, highly respected overseer from the area where we grew up, was found dead in a hotel room. This was in and of itself really unusual, because workers don't stay in hotel rooms. They stay in the homes of professing people.
Oh.
So it was very strange. Kind of the thought at the time was that maybe he had been sick and stopped for the night so that he wouldn't get anyone else sick. Nobody really knew. And there was a huge funeral for him. And time passed. And then...
What's a huge funeral? I don't know if Mormons have big funerals, but the funeral for this
I don't know
man
how many would have been there.
Hundreds of people, 500 people?
They had it at a convention grounds. Oh, easily 500. I was thinking more 1,000.
Maybe 1,000. A highly
Pretty sure my
respected
grandpa
person.
had
An overseer
at
is...
least 500.
Yeah. Some of these funerals can get really, really big, especially for a minister who spent his whole life in, and especially as an overseer, highly respected. People traveled from miles around, from states away to go visit this.
This was a man that we had stay in our homes when we were children.
Oh, wow.
So he was a worker that we grew up knowing really well.
Yeah.
And so then end of 2022, our support group has around 700 members. Fast forward to March 2023, we received a message from a group member in our support group that she had heard, or someone had posted, was it Sheree maybe even posted, that there was rumors going around that workers were calling emergency gatherings with workers and elders across the Western U.S. and Canada, which was, there was no reason why that would be necessary in our minds. We'd never heard of such a thing
It's rare.
happening before. It was unheard of, like unprecedented. We're like, okay, something big is going on. That's very strange. So we were kind of keeping our ear low to the ground in our group, and then I get a message from someone in the group that her sister, who was a 2x2 at that time and the wife of an elder, was at one of these gatherings, and that the workers had handed them a letter about Dean Brewer, who was the worker who had died in the hotel room, that said he was an abuser who abused women and children. And then they were told to hand the letter back to the workers, but she, this elder's wife, Hero, managed to get pictures of the letter on her phone and sent them to her sister, who, with her permission, sent them to us. So we had this letter in our possession written by Dean Brewer's successor, the current overseer of that area in the Pacific Northwest, about Dean Brewer. I have, if you don't mind, can I read part of it?
Please.
Our dear friends, I'm skipping part of it, but pointing out the main part. We have come to the tragic conclusion that Dean Brewer had another side to his life that none of us except victims ever witnessed or suspected. It has come to the surface in recent months, and more so in recent weeks, that Dean was a sexual predator. We never respect or defend such totally inappropriate behavior among us. There's a very united consensus among us that the only thing to do is to be transparent with all of you for obvious reasons, though this is very difficult. We are very sorry for the hurt this will bring to the hearts of many. Thankfully, he is no longer in a position to hurt anyone. Some things have come to light from Dean's own records. Dean had his own Best Western Hotel preferred customer account and spent a considerable amount of time and money in motels. As we all know, when he died last June, it was in a motel in Government Camp, Oregon, a place that he frequented. The receipts often included 2 guests. Victims have come forward. His actions include rape and abuse of underage victims. He totally abused his authority as an overseer in order to control, manipulate, and threaten his victims. So we transcribed this letter, and it has a typo at the bottom, "Sincerely, you brother," and then signed by the current overseer. We transcribed this and decided, Abby and I specifically decided to release it publicly on social media.
What do you mean by transcribe?
Wrote it down in this copy that somebody had sent. Did we transcribe it?
So it wouldn't be the original document?
It is not the original.
We have
To
photos.
avoid legal stuff?
So remember, I had mentioned how the workers showed her the letter. She
Yeah.
took pictures on her phone.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
got those
Oh,
images, and
okay.
from those
Got it.
images,
Got it.
I put it in a format that was shareable
Got
for
it. Now I get it.
online.
A really important point that they weren't handing the letter out to everybody. They were showing it to people they viewed as worthy to see it in the church, which is some elders and some workers, not all, and then taking the hard copies back for themselves. They didn't want to distribute a copy, but someone took a photo and transcribed it.
So they were telling elders, to tell their meetings about Dean, but to, and I quote, be vague. And this was also only a certain geographical area where Dean had spent the most time. Now, being a prominent overseer, he had traveled extensively, including to other countries. But because he mostly labored or was on worker lists in the northern western part of the U.S. and into Canada, they believed those were the only areas that needed to know. And that was historically how they handled things, was keeping it very geographical and quiet. And we decided there's so many people that know who Dean is that I think everyone should know this. Like everyone in the current and ex community should know. So Abby and I shared it both in our group, and from there people shared it, and on our public Facebook pages. And I think for both of us, I know for me, I think for Abby, this was the first time either of us had shared anything about the church since leaving, and they left like a decade before we did. So that was kind of a scary thing to do, but we felt like it was important that people know. And yeah, the next couple months were absolute chaos for us specifically. So we have an admin chat where the four of us communicate about group things. And I wanted to read a little bit of what we were talking about at the time, because it like shows the impact of this. So when we first got the letter, March 22nd, 2023, and heads up to anyone who doesn't like this, there's a lot of cursing in here because we were very shaken up. So I said, holy fuck, Mike, and this was after I showed them all the letter before we shared it publicly. Mike says, yeah, this is huge. This is some serious shit. Kyle said, I feel sick to my stomach. Abby said, I'm raging. I said, I'm shaking. So this was our initial response to this news about this overseer, who we all knew really well, had in our homes as kids. And for the record, Mike and Abby gave us permission to read this. And at that point, membership in our group was at 900 people. And Mike says, maybe this news will push us to 1,000 before the end of the month, which it happened like the day later. The next day, we released the letter. Kyle, we're still processing. Kyle says, holy crap, I had no idea DB was this kind of worker. This is hard to process. I feel like the floodgates are about to open. People are going to start telling their stories, and it's going to get ugly. Which it did.
Yeah, and I knew part of it was just that he was so well respected. We looked at workers not as deities, but we looked up to them a lot. We realized they sacrificed their lives for us to bring the gospel. We look up to them so much. And Dean in particular, my family looked up to him. They thought he was this great guy. And so I understood, because we'd both been so recently through a faith crisis, this was going to cause faith crises, to find out if it could happen once, could it happen more? That's an open door to a faith crisis. And I was terrified for people inside. And I actually gave a heads up to some people I knew, my immediate family being one of them, saying, I have a letter. I know it's authentic. We actually authenticated it before we shared it to anybody to make sure it was real. It wasn't somebody just spreading rumors. And I said, there's going to be, people are going to spread rumors. This is going to be crazy. This is, one guy with some indiscretions hit everyone really hard. And there was some discussion about, like, in sharing this publicly, are we going to be responsible for throwing other people into a full-on faith crisis? I was terrified of that.
Because we had just come out of this very dark period of time, and we weren't interested in dragging other people through that.
Exactly.
But it felt like the right thing to do. Abby says this bombshell is going to go down much differently than they have in the past, meaning other scandals that had just been handled very locally, and usually what they would do is they'd move a worker to a different area.
Like the Catholic Church.
Yep. Very similar.
She said, our group is a massive force at this point, meaning we have a group of people who are now organized and sharing information.
One thing that happened right away is people started realizing that they got the letter from the ex community and not from the workers. And that bothered a lot of people. And that letter, I don't know if you're going to get to this, but the letter started to be shared within the community. The workers started sharing the letter around, and so people started posting it online. And we realized right away, Kari mentioned a typo in the letter. We realized that was our copy of the letter. The workers
found
your typo.
Our copy.
And we thought about correcting the typo, and then we thought, well, it's out there now, people have it. What we realized, and I'll just fast forward a little bit, to this day, we've never seen a copy of the letter that wasn't the one we released.
Yep.
Even though we know word for word it is their letter. We've authenticated it.
Yeah, an overseer wrote this letter, but they never intended it to be widely shared.
They wanted to just share it with a few people and then kind of make this go away.
But you have the photo of it, right?
We have a photo of it as well, yeah.
Have you shared the photo of it?
No, I don't think we never shared the photo of it.
Is there a reason?
We didn't need to, actually.
I think considering an elder's wife was brave enough to send it to the ex community, that my thought was to protect her.
Yeah, I think that was the main thing, because they were still in. But yeah, we started having people flooding to us for information, instant messaging us like, what is this scandal? How bad is it? We're not getting information from our own workers, our own elders.
So we were just being absolutely flooded with messages from people both in and out of the church who were like, what's happening? I want more information. You guys seem to have the information. Why am I not hearing information from my workers? And also, I was raped. Or I was abused, and not just by Dean. Like, lots of stories were starting to come out. So at the end of that day, I said, good job today, everyone. You guys are seriously amazing, and today was tough. A lot of emotions and chaos being flung around. We are a great team. We all deserve a round of applause keeping it together today, and also processing our own feelings and being brave. Because again, this was somebody that we knew who had these allegations. The next day, Kyle says, try describing our last 48 hours to ourselves 10 years ago. I said, this will all hit the media one day in some way for sure. Guys, you do realize we broke that letter. That is why people inside, is what I meant, don't know. They were not going to know. The workers never had any intention of people reading that letter. Abby says, seriously, it wouldn't have gotten out otherwise. Maybe with a few connected people, maybe a couple of families would be disrupted, but most wouldn't even know. And then we started talking about how people would leave over this. Kyle and I speculated over whether or not his parents would cancel their trip to see us that next month.
And they did.
Which they did. They haven't seen our kids since.
Yeah, they're very upset that we released that information. They didn't. That's it. I think it probably felt like betrayal to them, and they haven't wanted to speak to us since much. There's a little bit of communication, but it's not the same as it was. And I think
none with our kids.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We had multiple elders and their wives reaching out to us, upset that they had found out from our post online and not from the workers. On March 25th, we posted information in our support group on how survivors could report to local law enforcement, as well as resources, because we had survivors experiencing mental health crises and who were suicidal. Mm-hmm. And we posted that information at the request of the sheriff's office, who we reached out to confirm some things that we had heard about Dean. And we were able to get his death report from them, because there were a lot of crazy rumors going around that we wanted to make sure we were putting out accurate information.
How'd he die?
They didn't say how he died, but they did say it was natural causes. One of the rumors going around at the time in the 2x2s was that he had died bent over a hymn book listening to a meeting. That's not true. He had accessed pornography that day, and he was found dead on his couch, on the couch in the hotel room. He had several white envelopes with $100 bills in them. Other than that, there was really nothing interesting on the report. Natural causes, it said. He had a letter in his car giving him permission to drive it, because, of course, workers don't drive their own cars. They drive church member cars. I said, I'm just swamped with messages right now. Today is going to be wild. Then I said I was in the bathroom being sick because my name was circulating in the 2x2s as the one who had spoken with the police. So it was actually Mike who had called and gotten that information from the police, but my name was going around the 2x2s as the person who had done that. And it's funny looking back on this, because the idea that my name circulating amongst the 2x2s would make me feel sick to my stomach to the point that I was in the bathroom is laughable now, because we're very notorious in the 2x2 community now, just because of what we do with our support group and because of this crisis. But back then, it's interesting to see like how uncomfortable I was with that idea that people would know who I was in that community.
Let me ask, how do members, again, what do you call them? Members of the movement?
I don't know. Professing people.
How do the professing people,
we'll call them 2x2s.
They like, oh, there's this letter. Oh, one of our own may have been abusive. Let me find a support group. If they don't think of themselves as 2x2, if the church doesn't call itself 2x2, how do they find a Facebook group called 2x2 when they don't even think of the church as being named that or identify as 2x2.
In the beginning, it was word of mouth, people telling other people about it.
That would have had to have been believing members telling other believing members.
I think a lot of communication opened up around the scandal.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and we have really pushed the term 2x2 to the point that like international media has published articles not using the term 2x2, and we've reached out to the journalists and been like, you have to include the term 2x2 or your article's not going to show up in searches. Like, and they have gone back and edited it and put it back in.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you named the church.
We didn't, but we promoted the name that already has existed for
That's
over
right.
100 years. Right. We popularized it. Yeah.
You popularized the name for the church.
Yeah. We gave the X community an identity. That was our goal in pushing the term 2x2. Was this is our identity. This is the culture we came from. It has a name.
And to your point, though, it's a great point because people when we started the group, many people joined early on and said, "Oh, this is my old community. I left 30 years ago and haven't talked to anybody since. I don't even know how to find ex-members." That's how little community there was. Like I say, there were a few websites and groups here and there, but as far as a broader community, there wasn't a broader community. There many people had left. Of course, now we're finding out because of abuse and things, but also just all kinds of reasons they left the community and have never talked to anybody. And feel kind of weird. Like I have this weird history that doesn't match anything anywhere. So that's part of why we've been pushing the whole 2x2 concept. It's like, if we can just get this concept out there, then people can find each other.
So the workers were sent our infograph about how to report abuse and what like resources for if you're in a mental health crisis. And they started sending it around. And then they found out it came from the X community. And all of a sudden they were like, we don't know if we can trust this then. So they ended up calling the sheriff's office and validating what we had said, that they had recommended we share those resources. It was just like there were so many mind games going on in the 2x2 community at the same time, where the workers were like, this looks like helpful information, I'm going to share it. And then they find out it comes from the X community, because the only information was coming from the X community at that time, on how to help survivors.
And and just to throw in what I know, ABC News ends up covering this. The FBI is investigating. It's an ongoing investigation, and the last number I heard was like 800 to 900 reports of covered up child abuse.
Yeah, I mean that was our next several months, was just people reaching out to us. A lot of people not even wanting to report to anything, just wanting to hear someone to hear their story. Like, 20 years ago, something happened to me. I need someone to talk to, and there's been different hotlines and different organizations that have stepped up and set up different things. But ultimately, we'll talk about the FBI in a second. But the next several months of our lives was just fielding calls from people who'd been abused and had never told anybody about it.
Yeah, so a couple of days later, we got another message from a survivor, along with two other survivors that this person knew about, asking about one of the current overseers of the Pacific Northwest, if we had heard of any allegations against him. That one really shook us up again, because this was someone we had stay in our homes when we were young. And there were 3 survivors coming forward at the same time. We sat on that for a couple of days, not like wanting to we were really just processing it. Like it felt like the last good guy that we knew was going down. Like it felt like if he has allegations, who doesn't? Like the whole thing is corrupt, right? That's how it felt to us at the time. It was just a really big thing to process. And then the church, or some workers, I should say, sent out an email that some current 2x2s had also come forward with allegations about this same man. So we shared that and said, we also have had people in the X community altogether. I think there were 7 or 8 survivors who ended up coming out against this other overseer. So he stepped down from his position as overseer, but they were keeping him on as a worker, and he was still allowed to attend meetings. So we pushed publicly.
Meetings stay in people's homes.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he was staying in people's homes still, or if he was with a relative, but he was still preaching. Our understanding was that he was still allowed to preach, and he was still having fellowship with people, including women and children. So we posted about this online a lot until current 2x2s picked it up and put pressure on the workers to remove him entirely from the ministry and from meetings. So he was removed.
Wow.
In the report that I heard from ABC News, the guy that was named as an abuser, the news report said that he was suspended or put on probation for a time, but by 6 years later, he's been promoted. So this idea that just seems so strange to me in Mormonism, that literally child abuse can get you a promotion, I'm seeing the same thing happen in the 2x2s.
Yeah, and there were also a lot of people up high who knew about these things. Like, we were hearing from survivors. Abby and I were getting individually 12 to 15 messages a day from people reporting abuse that they had been abused by 2x2s. And a lot of these survivors had told workers at the time that it happened, or told other people, elders, somebody they trusted in the church, and nothing had been done about it.
Or some minor little change, like, shuffling some worker off to a different state, sometimes to a different country, different places, trying to shake things up a little bit. Tell these people, well, don't go to this meeting anymore. We'll assign you to a different meeting to keep you two apart and all that stuff. So they'd been trying to take, again, they have the highest authority. They have the authority of God. So they're just doing stuff. And it's not particularly educated or trauma-informed, of course, and legally dubious, I would say. But they thought of themselves as the main authority to do this. And they kept it away from law enforcement most of the time.
So go ahead, John. You had a question.
Well, I mean, if there's no organization, then there's no organization to sue.
Exactly.
And there's no organization to name.
To hold accountable.
And I can even tell you right now that in one generation, this will probably largely be forgotten because all the current members don't
That was our goal with media.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying, like, it's even worse with the LDS Church and the Catholic Church. But with you guys, if nobody thinks of themselves as 2x2s, if everyone's discouraged from even mentioning this or talking about it, if there's no lawsuit, if there's no one to sue, then fast forward a generation, no one talks about it. It all gets forgotten, and there's no even way to trace it because none of these people think of themselves as 2x2s,
Yeah.
and so they won't have any way to say that happened to our community because they won't think of themselves as 2x2s nor have any reason to look up the term 2x2.
I think the term 2x2 has been promoted enough at this point that people would at least know to Google it. Like, I have nieces and nephews still in the church, and that's my worst fear, is that all of this will repeat itself generation after generation. And our motivating factor for talking to media and pushing the term 2x2 out there,
of course,
was to prevent this from happening again in the future. Prior to this abuse scandal, if you Googled, there wasn't media about the 2x2s. There were people screaming into the wind, particularly Australia, I think, had a 60 Minutes thing that they had done about, and there were some survivors who were talking about their abuse, especially in Australia, I would say, but it hadn't become a well-known thing. Media hadn't really picked up on it, especially not U.S. media. So there was a reporter who had some connections with the 2x2s. She hadn't been a member, but she had grown up sort of with some relatives who were members, and she published an article in the Daily Dot about, and I think that was the first one that talked about the crisis. And from after that, it just exploded in the media, and we had.
Well, you know what happened next is someone reached out to us and said, hey, we have a contact at Vice News named Anna Merlin. And we said, we know
the same
her.
Anna Merlin who covered the Tim Ballard stuff.
Same one. And we'd just been listening to Tim Ballard and we're like, yes, let's get her. So
we worked with her.
You and Abby worked with her quite a bit. And she put out a couple articles before Vice Digital went down. But
with Rolling Stone or?
With Vice.
With
before Vice went away.
You said that.
It was right before Vice.
Okay.
So that was kind of a cool connection too. We'd actually heard of her on Mormon Stories.
That's awesome.
And then the Hulu doc producers, we worked with them behind the scenes. We're not on the documentary. It would have been nice to get some credit, but we didn't.
Put a lot of time into that.
We put a lot of time into that. We spent a year working behind the scenes, connecting them with some survivors.
I do that all the time. I'm always consulting documentaries, and you don't get any credit or money. And that's fine.
We didn't.
We do it for the cause.
The story got out there.
But it's just weird that.
Yeah.
But that was the first media outside of a few print articles. That was the first documentary, quote unquote. It was kind of a long news
Nothing
piece.
had ever.
What's the name of the documentary?
Before. Secrets of the 2x2 Church. I think it's Impact X Nightline or Night.
Yeah, it's on Hulu.
It is?
Okay,
it's on Hulu. Mm-hmm. I should have that written down, but I don't.
Okay.
And then, so November, so we were working with media throughout that summer. And November 2023, Mike and Abby were, it was 2023?
Mm-hmm.
Mike and Abby were at our house for Thanksgiving. It was the day before Thanksgiving. I was upstairs taking a nap. I missed a phone call. They left a message. I checked my messages. They had my full name correctly. Hi, Kari Hanks. This is so-and-so from the FBI. We'd like to talk all things 2x2. And here's how you can verify that this is a real call, not a scam. So I did that. I verified through their instructions that it was indeed FBI. That was quite a shock. Went downstairs, told Mike and Abby and Kyle, like, you guys, I just missed a call from the FBI. They want to talk to Abby and I. I was like, we called him back and I was like, well, actually, Mike and Abby are here for Thanksgiving right now. And he's like, yeah, I'd like to talk to you both. I'm not sure if that means he knew they were there.
They knew a lot of things.
They knew a lot of things. They knew overseer names. They knew the regions those overseers were over. They had done their background work.
They liked all your posts. They
had listened to our podcast on Trust Me and said that they had really appreciated that. One of the first things he asked was, are you safe? Have you received any threats from the church? Fortunately, we had not, so we were able to say that we were safe. He thanked us for what we've been doing for survivors. He knew that we had cataloged quite a long list of information. Abby has put in the majority of that, tracking movements of overseers and what years they were in what areas and workers in general.
Wow.
She's put in so much work to all that. So we've kept kind of an ongoing, mostly email communication with the FBI. There was a recent article published in BBC about another sort of side scandal involving something we call the Baldwin babies, which is allegedly coerced adoptions in the 2x2s that the workers were facilitating. So, for example, I've had mothers come to me who wanted to send information about that to the FBI, but were too nervous or just didn't have the emotional capacity. So I'll pass information on at the request of survivors or Baldwin baby mothers or whatever.
So their investigation's been going on since then, and they've interviewed, I would say,
we recently heard
almost everyone I know connected to this has been interviewed in person by the FBI now. We've had many stories of people saying,
they recently
the FBI
said
showed up at my house today.
They've interviewed 1,000 people and still have another 1,000 to interview and are still receiving reports. So the FBI publicly announced an investigation into the church with a landing page specifically for the 2x2 church. So it's like fbi.gov/ I don't remember the exact website, but it has the term 2x2 in the landing page, which is really wild to see. And meanwhile, our group was just absolutely exploding because people were hearing about it because we were sharing public information, and then word of mouth, and everyone was like, where's the information coming from? It's coming from the support group. So we had a lot of ex-members who had been out for a long time just hearing about the group. We had a mass exodus from the 2x2s who were flocking to our group. And we went from 900 members to over 3,000 by the end of that year. And now we're hovering around 5,500.
Which is freaking amazing.
Which is crazy because that's just a lot of homes. That's one person that has Facebook. It's not the 5 people who left. So, we talked about church size. I think in the 80s, we think it was probably at its peak, 150 to 200, maybe more. And anecdotally, we've heard many people say that their fields or their meetings are half the size they were now. Several people have said to me, my entire meeting left when we realized that half the women had been abused or assaulted in the meeting. But none of us had ever talked about it. Finally, somebody said, let's do a straw poll. I was talking to somebody who said that they were in a meeting where the elder of the meeting, the man of the home, said, well, there's a few victims. That's not a problem for us. We don't need to worry about it. We don't know any victims. And somebody said, raise your hand if you were a victim. And half the women in the meeting raised their hands. And ultimately, that entire meeting, as far as I know, has left the belief system. So, and that's a story we just keep hearing versions of that repeated.
Wow. Yeah, and that's something that's different that we've been hearing about that, to my knowledge, hadn't happened before, where you have entire family groups and entire meetings leaving together, which is just fascinating to me.
So when I was listening to the ABC News report, it characterized this system of celibate missionaries or elders staying in people's homes with children around that are highly trusted as like the perfect recipe for abuse.
Yeah. And we, of course, grew up believing that they had extra power from God to live a better life. And of course, as you get older, you just don't analyze that. Of course, this is going to happen. Of course, having that scenario you just laid out, of course, that's not going to end well. But if you've been raised in it believing that God gave this group extra power to do the right thing or whatever, and you think everybody's being super conscientious all the time, that it'll come as a surprise. And that's why a lot of people, and I genuinely feel bad for people in the church right now, hitting a wall at 100 miles an hour going, oh, that didn't work out like I thought it would. It's led to significant abuse at a scale that's pretty crazy. I mean, it's not wrong to bring up spotlight.
Well, here, I have some numbers on how big this abuse scandal is, at least. So Mike and Abby have been collecting worker lists, including historical worker lists. So Mike ran some numbers recently, and this is what he wrote. So I'm quoting Mike. About 20% of male workers within the U.S. since 1950, brother workers in the U.S. since 1950, have allegations of sexual abuse. 20%.
That you know of.
That we know of.
About 4% of the Catholic clergy has been alleged to have committed sexual abuse, just to compare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there are...
And they have an awesome TikTok. I highly recommend. It's at our 2x2 story.
Oh, cool.
OUR 2x2 story. Yeah, that's Mike and Abby, and we highly recommend. They do a really, really good job of speaking to these issues. So...
Wow. And I'm struck by the idea that if ever there was a church, and we talked about this in part 1, so you missed it if you didn't watch part 1, but if ever there was a church set up to explicitly avoid the pitfall of so many religions, which is their downfall due to sex, money, and power, it was your church. It was almost like it didn't even have a name. It didn't even have a legal organizational structure. It totally downplayed and then erased its founder. And then it did all that it could to have it be local, no churches, no real estate, run in people's homes, and then no personality cults, or at least minimizing the risk of personality cults. So like, how is this church going to become taken down by allegations of sex, money, and power? You're even making your missionaries celibate so they can't go around having sex with people. So like, how could anything go wrong? And yet it turns out that suppression of sexuality probably led to extreme, let's just say, perversions or abuse by those missionaries, because it's just like we learn with Catholic celibate priests, it's just unhealthy and unnatural to just completely suppress
a human need.
A basic core human need, which is sexuality. It leads to abuse and perversions and probably serious mental health problems.
Severe. Yeah.
So in spite of the organization being carefully curated to avoid those things, it actually creates a likely higher than average prevalence of sexual abuse.
That's it.
Right? Yeah. Clearly, y'all were, in terms of power, you were controlled I would say your cult was more extreme than the cult, than the Mormon church that I was raised in. I don't know if y'all see it that way, but I see what y'all were raised in as probably more severe and extreme than what I was raised in. So that just speaks to the undue influence and power that the leaders had over the members, even though it was designed for them not to have power.
Right. I mean, even the Mormon Church has Curtin and McConkie, right?
Yeah.
They know there's systems in place to address the pitfalls if they happen. Whether or not that's done correctly, that's for them to decide. But in our group, there was no higher authority than the worker that was just happened to be in your field this year. And you've said before, something you have said before that when you said it, I was like, that's it. People shouldn't speak for God.
Yeah.
When you start speaking for God, that takes away all accountability, and there's no room for someone to say, hey, hold on a second, can we talk about this one thing? And when you don't hold on a second and talk about this one thing for 100 years, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to end up with a lot of unaccountable people with unchecked power.
Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking to the problems with mental health that you were saying, there were some ex-members and ex-workers who recently did a survey of about 70 to 80 ex-workers, and they found that 72% of them experienced depression while in the work, 76% had anxiety, 17% had OCD, 37% had suicidal ideation, and over 5% had a suicide attempt. So
An attempt.
Mental
That's
health.
crazy to think about.
at least for the workers, is what this was on. Is
the prevalence of OCD is 1% to 2% of the population. So if it's
And OCD is hidden in groups like this. That's part of the problem of groups that are
virtue.
very top down. Exactly.
virtue.
The mental illness can hide in groups that don't allow for that sort of trying to learn about yourself, trying to learn about mental health, just that simple idea. Everything you do is seen as a virtue or something wrong with you. And so when you have a system that's not accountable at all, and you've also pathologized normal humanity as being sinful, so if something happens to you, it's actually your fault that it happened. It's not the group that did it to you, and it's not human nature that God created you with. It's just a stew where, yeah, at the end of the day, it's like it's surprising it happened and it was chaotic. It's happening, by the way. It's not over. The FBI investigation's currently ongoing. The story's not over.
But how do you shut down an organization that doesn't exist?
That's the question.
Can I just say, like, it actually reminds me of, do you remember the picture that you look at and it's like a woman and you look at it and it's one thing? And
a
then they'll
beautiful
tell
lady
you,
and then an old
yeah,
man.
and then it tells
Yeah.
you. That's what that reminds me of. You're saying, oh, the setup, it was this perfect thing to eliminate all of the, but then look again, and it's the perfect scenario to hide predators, to
Right.
create this perfect thing. It's that flip of like, actually, it's also perfect.
Yeah.
Hard to
It
track.
really is.
Hard to like, and
No accountability if there's no name nor corporate structure.
Well, and the 2x2s never saw leadership in the workers. They would never call workers leadership. And many of them, for the very first time, because of this abuse crisis happening, realized they had no power over the overseers. For an example, there was an overseer, I'll just say in the Midwest, who was treating survivors really horribly, like sending out emails saying, I will not hear more reports of abuse. Gossiping is evil. We shouldn't be calling out people's crimes, by which he meant abusers. There were some really awful rumors about how he had treated women, not necessarily allegations, but just red flags and just not being nice to survivors in general, not hearing them, not supporting them. A lot of current 2x2s in his area wanted him out, and he would not step down. So they're realizing for the first time, when we actually take the reins of power and call for accountability, there's no check and balance here. They don't have to step down if they
speak
don't
for
want
God.
to. So we realized during this time, this was about a year ago now, and it did end up in the media, that he had a Facebook account, which was unusual if you're a worker, especially
Especially an overseer.
an overseer. And it wasn't very active, and I wasn't friends with him on Facebook, but his likes were public. So Abby and I realized he has this Facebook page. His likes are public. I went on there and I took a screenshot video of pages that he liked and followed. They included questionably underage close-ups of volleyball players' butts. And our favorite, because this is like a very 2x2 thing, an Archie website that took Archie comics and created fanfic porn out of them. Now, Archie comics growing up was like one of the forms of entertainment that we were allowed. Like most 2x2s grew up with hundreds of Archie
The
comics.
most scandalous thing.
Archie porn.
Archie porn. So I
That's
posted.
your soaking, basically.
Yes, Archie. So I posted this video, no comment, no context, online publicly. It went viral within the church. Within that week, a few days, overseers from the Pacific Northwest flew out on a plane to where this overseer was, and he stepped down from the work.
Wow.
It took porn. It took pornography
force,
to hold him
basically.
accountable, not how he was treating survivors.
yeah,
Right.
Legal porn.
yeah.
That's what it took to hold him accountable. And it took other overseers getting on a plane and flying over there to deal with him to get him taken down. So that is a leadership structure, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
How does it feel to have so much power to be taken
That one
down?
was fun. That was like the
you're
one
ki-
fun thing we did
You're
that
kind
year.
of taking down a cult. You're kind of like Leah Remini and Mike Rinder taking down a cult.
Right.
basically.
And it's crazy because that's true. And we feel a heavy responsibility about how we message things, that we're not passing along false things, that we want to be trauma informed. That's something we've all learned. Trauma informed as a concept.
That's right. We're not professionals.
Yeah, trauma informed as a concept is something we have all learned. The four of us who run this group and others around, there's a wide community of people who are helping out and doing different things, have different initiatives to help. But all of that's being done by the X community. The inside community feels no responsibility at all. They view any accountability as persecution. So there's no reason for them to go out and learn how to actually take care of these things and how to speak to survivors, how to address victims. So to your point, we do have a lot of power, but it's not power that we wanted. This all fell in our lap, but it fell in our lap because we were the ones being responsible. Back to that theme.
And a lot of the X community has so many survivors in it. So you have groups of survivors, including myself, helping other survivors because the church won't do it, which is re-traumatizing.
Absolutely.
Some of the stories we heard, I cannot even tell you how horrendous they were. And we're not trained to handle things like that. But the church isn't being accountable to its own situation that, frankly, it created.
Right. Yep. Such a good point.
So I have so many questions. So we talked about sex and power. You say this guy died with envelopes full of $100 bills. Where's the church getting money? How much money does the church have? Like, there was a time where no one knew that the Mormon Church was a $300 billion corporation.
The FBI is very interested in asking the same questions. There's a lot of money. There's a lot. We don't know how much. It's
there
not
has
tracked.
To be.
We do know that there are wealthy 2x2s who are holding accounts of money for workers. So it's not necessarily in the workers' names.
Yeah. We always get asked two things. Anywhere we've talked, there's two questions. One, is this a cult? Two, how does the money go? And the fact that I'm now in my early 40s and have no idea how money is handled in that group is very strange. Mm-hmm. That everything's done privately because there's no organization. There's no public accountability. There's no, how churches oftentimes as nonprofits will publish their statements of what they've been doing with their money. No one's doing that. I've heard rumors that are shocking enough that I wouldn't repeat them because it's like, if that's true, there's the money going through this church is
but
hard
we
for
do
me to wrap my head
know that
around.
there have been wealthy 2x2s who have died and left all of their inheritance
Entire
to workers.
estates, yeah.
We do know that the workers fly other workers around the world every year for conventions to the tune of thousands and thousands of dollars, that they move workers around a lot. There's a lot of money. There's one area of the country that is funding therapy for survivors. It's the only part of the country that's doing it, one small geographical area. And that has been quite expensive for them because I know that they've had a lot of survivors utilizing that.
They can't be banned from countries because they don't exist.
Right.
It's got to be done at an individual level, I think. I don't know. I got to be honest.
How would you even find the leaders?
I don't know how the FBI is going to handle it because there's nothing to grab onto. It's just a bunch of individual people.
They express frustration to us at the same thing. Like, how do you hold accountable a group of people so good at not existing?
That's right. Being invisible.
Yep.
I guess I'm just curious, like, where are y'all going from here? Are y'all like, I saw that you have a podcast.
Yeah.
It seems like it's audio only. It doesn't even seem to have the name 2x2 in it. Like, have y'all considered?
No, it does.
Does it? Okay. Well, have y'all considered a YouTube channel?
So here's the thing about all this. We went from fully in to COVID, deconstructing really quickly, darkly deconstructing, starting a group, and a little over a year into the group, a major global scandal breaks. We haven't really put ourselves back together yet.
Yeah.
And our deconstruction completely hit pause during this scandal too, because we didn't have time to think about our own emotional needs during this time. There were so many survivors coming forward, and a lot of these had allegations against people we knew, and a lot of the survivors were people we knew. So
people
that's
we've known all our life.
A lot of processing. I'm in trauma therapy twice a week right now, and we just very recently have been kind of talking about like our deconstruction again, and like where are we on this, and picking back up on that, and like what do we still need to process, and what would be healing for us, and things like that.
And speaking into it a little bit, I think all of us when we left, we had a little bit of deference to the group. It's a group that oh, it's just a bunch of people who like to get together for Bible studies. It's not for me, but they can do their thing. And we maybe didn't want to speak into them too much. We didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. We didn't want to cause any offenses or anything like that. Even though we're not believing, we've left, we have our own beliefs now. I think just now, 2 years post Dean letter, right about now, it's in a couple weeks, 2 years, we're just starting to get our head above water a little bit and think, well, how do we want to speak into this? And I mean, coming here, for one thing, is being much more public, talking publicly about it. And we talk about Mike and Abby's TikTok, which is really good and hits really hard. They're talking
Abby
about things.
helped found a nonprofit called Voices for the Truth, which has partnered with RAIN, the international, I forget the acronym for RAIN, but they help sexual abuse survivors. So she has Voices, which is awesome.
And there will always be people who are hardliners, who are inside, who will think that it's persecution. In fact, increasingly so, I would say that the people who remain are the hardliners more than ever. The people who had any nuance to it or had maybe a conscience towards some of this stuff anyway have all left now. So the people who are inside still are much more harder to reach maybe. But for our own selves, yeah, it's like, okay, well, yeah, where do we go now? We're starting to kind of feel that out a little bit and speak into it. My own little YouTube project is just talking about stuff publicly. People know it's me. I use a pseudonym, but it's not because I'm hiding. It's because I wanted to separate it out from the being an admin of a support group a little bit. So it's called Cow Tipper Vern's X2x2 podcast. Cow Tipper Vern is an old moniker I used on a website back in the GeoCities Angel Fire days. When
That's so long ago.
Yeah, I know. A friend and I had a silly website we used. It was like redneck themed and stuff. So so we used cow tipper names. So
Have you ever tipped a cow?
I never have. I don't think you can. I think
that's folklore.
I think so. I think that cow tipping is one of those things that everybody knows. It's kind of like a lot of the stories you hear in churches about, oh, this thing that happened somewhere. Everyone knows someone who tipped a cow, but no one's actually done it. And I think that's true for a lot of these apocryphal stories you hear in church meetings about, like, oh, this thing happened and this person, had this revelation, or this person crashed their car because they
spent the last of their money that they had to get to convention, overfeeding their family.
They didn't commit to God, and then some terrible thing happened. None of that happened, probably. It's probably, everybody knows somebody who it's happened to, but it hasn't happened to them. So, yeah.
All right, I'm curious about X2x2ers. So have you ever gotten together in groups as X2x2ers? And if so, in what format, how?
We've tried to do
Kyle and I've... And then when Mike and Abby are in town, we try to host at least one a year locally in Arizona where we are. We've had some people fly in from out of town for it, which was cool.
What's the biggest group you've seen?
We've had 40 or 50, I think.
40 or 50.
The first year
That's
was
cool.
The first year was
First year were like
people.
5 of us, 5 or 10 of us.
But again, it's global too. So like in our group, a significant percentage of our group is actually from Australia, and a significant percentage are from Canada. And there's certain parts of we have people in our Facebook support group now from every continent. So we're all still pretty spread out. But we
not
encourage
every continent, not Antarctica.
Not yet. Eventually.
Thank you for that.
I'm glad somebody's
the literalism
giving
in
some
me.
clarity to what I'm
myself.
saying.
Thanks, Kari. That
Words
was
matter.
important.
Words
They do.
matter.
You're right.
Yeah.
They do. I got to be careful, as we've already seen.
I'm just kidding.
And then other people have been setting up meetups for X's and stuff. So, maybe not quite Thrive level yet, but a lot of people.
Ooh, you know about Thrive.
I know about Thrive. Yeah.
Y'all can come to Thrive. Y'all are welcome at Thrive.
Yeah, we should come sometime. So, yeah, but I think there's a lot of different, and like Kari mentioned, there's lots of spin-off groups as well of people gathering around certain interests, but X2x2. So, whatever those be, there's even a group recently that started for people who have left themselves but still have professing spouses. What to do about that? So they created their own Facebook spin-off of our group, and they're collecting people over there.
What's that called?
I don't know. It's a private group, and you have to come into our group. You got to know the secret handshake to get into some of these groups. But
you have secret handshakes.
No, we don't. But
we are not cult leaders.
But yeah, and then also we're watching a lot of other people start their own podcasts. Tons of Substacks now.
People are finding their voice, especially I think after the scandal. People aren't feeling like they have to defer to the 2x2 so much
There's
anymore.
no moral authority.
They're really reclaiming their voice and power.
I think there's part of you that when you leave, you still think you're broken somehow, that even if you don't believe it anymore, maybe you still carry some guilt, and that guilt's going away for a lot of people right now, and they're finally speaking into, yes, this is what I believe now. This is why I left. I'm not going to hide this anymore. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Well, man, hats off to y'all. I mean, I remember when Margie and I went through it at Microsoft in 2001, we had the same reaction. It's like, wait, this is way too hard. We got to figure out a way to make it less hard. And that was before podcasts existed. That was before social media existed. but we just couldn't not do it. And so
you guys have had a huge impact on people.
oh, well, that's not what I was saying.
But you have.
Oh,
That's what we're saying.
Oh, thank you. But I mean, it's cool to know there's someone else who kind of like, another couple that kind of like, yeah, this is way too hard. There's no support. There's no resources. How do we even find people?
Yep.
Let's do something about it. Like we need everyone in their own, coming out of their own religious tradition, if it's been harmful, to follow your example. That's so inspiring. I'm inspired. Are you inspired, Margie?
I am, and I really feel for, and I don't know. I'm inspired also by the attention you're giving your own healing, because I think coming out of, a conditioned place, recently kind of detransitioning, I think you can keep this belief that your purpose is to show up for other people and harm yourself doing so. Like, I think it's not so much about showing up for other people. It's like at any cost. It's that your own healing is not really important. And so just the fact that you address that, you're aware of, hey, we want to help people. We want to be there. And this was something we could not turn away from. And also, we want it to actually be good for us too. Mm-hmm. Like, we no longer want to participate in these missions or beliefs or ideas where we're the sacrificed people.
Yeah, and in fact, a few months into the abuse scandal, Kyle and I released a statement publicly on our social media that we needed to pull back from the public aspect of it, because we were the clearinghouse for information for the 2x2 church. And at this point we were like, you guys have enough information now. It's time to start taking accountability. We've put our lives on hold, our relationships on hold, our health on hold to be this clearinghouse for you for several months now. We're not going to abandon survivors, and we're not going to abandon the X community, but our focus is the X community. You 2x2s are on your own now. Like, figure it out with what we've given you informed consent.
We're passing the baton.
Yeah.
You can take it.
And we had to do that for our own mental health because it was just too much.
I can imagine.
So thrilled. I just, on this YouTube channel, just 2 months ago, ABC News announced former elder of secretive 2x2 Christian sect sentenced to 120 years in prison.
That's in our area. I know that guy.
His name's
Zwiefelhofer. We know him personally.
So you knew this guy.
I know him. I'm good friends with one of his daughter-in-law.
And it's listing just all these felony counts against him.
He had 10 counts of exploitation of a child, which is under Arizona law, what child pornography, that's the crime. And it's a very harsh sentencing in Arizona. So he got 10 years or 11 years, was it, per photograph?
Yeah. I want to make one point that I'm not sure if we've made clear yet, is that this isn't just the ministers were abusing people. It's the church is rife with abuse. So it's a percentage of it is ministers. It's also just abuse of relationship abuse, elders abusing people. And a lot of the assaults and abuses that have happened weren't from workers. It's just from the community at large.
Yeah, so. I think it was around 20% of the allegations we've heard involved allegations against workers, but there's also elders and there's family members, and it's a culture of systemic abuse.
Yes, it's so insidious.
And so interesting that you left not knowing any of this. You discovered that after leaving.
You left for separate.
Yeah, it's crazy. When I was going to a therapist, I started going, and a couple, maybe 2-3 months in, I was like, okay, scratch what we were going to talk about. This thing just happened. And that's what we talked about for the rest of the time. And at the end of when she was moving on to another job, she's like, yeah, you didn't plan any of that, did you? That just kind of fell in your lap, this whole thing. We left for very personal reasons. And yeah, now looking back, I wonder, I have to be honest, I wonder how I would feel if I were on the inside. Maybe true believing me would be on the wrong side of this. I have empathy for people who are inside.
We've had a lot of those conversations of like, would this have pushed us over the edge? Would this have pushed us over the edge?
And so when people are we hear people talk about like, oh, the X's are bitter and trying to just burn everything down. I actually don't. I don't care what anybody believes about God or anything. I just want people to be safe. But I understand if this is hard for you. It took me 1.5 years to tell my own family that I'd left, knowing how they'd think about it, with very little on the line. Now with a big scandal like this going on, hitting people very immediately, I actually have a lot of empathy for people and the struggles they're going through right now, and I hope everybody can get through it.
But just as informed consent as a motivation for you guys and what you do, I do feel like it's so important that 2x2s have the information so that they can make an informed decision on whether or not they want to be aligned with the church.
Amen.
They don't like informed consent. When I was young, there was that book we showed earlier. It's a really good book. It's a recent book. There's actually another book called The Secret Sect that was released in the 80s, and that was trying to give informed consent to people. And when I was young, probably 8, 10 years old, that book made its rounds in my community, and the people in the community burned it. Literally,
they were buying copies to burn.
They were buying copies of this book called The Secret Sect and burning copies of it. That's just so on the nose, but that's what they were doing back then. So informed consent hasn't always gone very well, but now with the internet, it's hard to burn copies of the internet. So.
Indeed.
Well, before we end, I'm just going to really quickly ask everybody, if you've enjoyed this episode, please take the time to like it. Please take the time to subscribe to this channel wherever you are listening or viewing, wherever it's being shown. Please comment. That helps. Please share it. Those are all ways that help encourage Spotify and YouTube and all the algorithms to kind of get the word out. We are always thankful to our donors that make all this possible. So thank you, donors. We couldn't do it without you. If you value this content and you want to see it continue, please go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, and become a monthly donor. I want to stay in touch. I have 1,000 questions. We probably need to wrap up for today. I'm really curious to hear, how ex-members are doing, how they're finding meaning and purpose and identity, how they're doing with alcohol and drugs and exploration into all different types of lifestyles. If there's a lot of similarities between ex-Mormons and ex-2x2s, we don't have time to get into that today. But mostly, I just want to say y'all are cousins, siblings in a sense.
Yep.
We are immediately in love. I can speak on behalf of all our viewers and listeners. We're in love with you guys and your communities. We hope we can find some way to support each other, to help each other, maybe even to get together at some point, because we have so much we can probably teach each other and learn from each other and support each other in. So, Kari and Kyle Hanks, thank you so much for your courage, both in leaving and figuring things out, but also in helping protect victims and give a voice to victims, for helping provide community to others who need it, and then to raise your voice and to come on this podcast, which is going to reach probably hundreds of thousands of people and that comes, Margie and I know probably as well as anyone, in this space, that comes at a price and it comes at a cost for our individual mental health, for our relationship with each other, for our relationship with extended family, and for our family and for our kids and everything. So as two people that kind of know a little bit about what y'all have been doing, our gratitude and admiration and love and support are extended to you. So thank you.
Yeah, we see you. We see the work, and we're grateful for the work that you've done, and wish you all the rest and space and healing too for you.
Thank you. That really means a lot. And thanks so much for having us on. It's been an honor, really.
Thank you very much.
All right. So if people want to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you? Go to that Facebook group?
Go to the Facebook group. I also have an email.
Well, the Facebook group is specifically for ex-2x2s or people who are trying to leave the church.
And John DeLynn.
John DeLynn. But you can also message us on there. You'll see us as admins.
Yeah, you can message us. Yeah. And Kyle, you have an email though.
Yeah, Kari and I, well, it's yours too. We have a Gmail address, ex2x2podcast@gmail.com, x2x2 podcast. And we kind of had an idea of having an us podcast. I kind of have my own little thing on there right now.
I needed to not be part of that right now. It's just too much.
Yeah, that's good.
But you can contact me there. So.
Yeah, we'll definitely respond to people who reach out there. Yeah.
And many times people comment on the YouTube this release as well, which is great.
Yeah. Do y'all have a way for people to financially support what you're doing, or do you not take donations?
We've done it all for free so far. We haven't.
We did for 5 years too.
Yeah.
Maybe it's about time.
I don't know. We'll see. I think we're finding a good balance right now. Yeah. So
yeah,
I appreciate that.
Okay. All right. Well, stay in touch, and we hope to see y'all again soon. Maybe come back on Mormon Stories, and
I would love
We'd
to.
love
talk
that.
again.
Thank you both, John and Margie. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Our pleasure. All right. Well, again, thanks to Kari and Kyle Hanks for coming on Mormon Stories podcast. Hats off to all the former and current 2x2ers out there, and all of our never Mormons who are viewers and listeners, as well as our Mormons and ex-Mormons. We just want this to be one in a series. We recently, just a month or two ago, I should give an update. We recently, a month or two ago, had an ex-Pentecostal on. Her name was Anna Schreier. Just this past weekend, our friend Nathan Hinckley with some family members, and I think another couple that we had on as well.
Oh, the Johnsons.
Yeah, went out to Anna Schreier's house and helped renovate and refurbish the house.
That's awesome.
And we'll be announcing it, but we shared photos on our last episode that we did on Sunday. But like, really fun story of one of our never Mormons receiving love from the community. So anyone who sent money to Anna Schreier, anyone who's helped out, including Nathan Hinckley and his family, and anyone else, the Johnsons or whoever's been loving them and helping them.
Yeah.
It just makes our hearts sing when the community rises up to support each other. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Happens?
I listened to that episode, and I'm really happy to hear that update.
Yeah. But also, we really want to hear from any of you who have never been Mormon, who watch or listen to Mormon Stories and feel particularly benefited by it. We want to hear your stories. So the way you do that is you go to mormonstories.org, you apply to be on the show, you create a little video, you fill out an application, we vet it, and if it feels like a good fit, then we'll invite you to come on. So we hope to have this be just one in a long series of Never Mormons. For me, it's fun because obviously I love Mormons and I love Mormon stories. But we're like over 2,000 episodes into Mormon Stories now. I've heard a lot of Mormon stories. Can you imagine? It's fun to hear stories from other traditions too?
Yeah, we love learning about other churches.
Yeah, so we want Mormon Stories to spotlight lots of high demand religions or groups. So please do that. Please email us at mormonstories@gmail.com if you have feedback. Again, we appreciate any financial support y'all can offer. Anything else, Margie, that I'm forgetting?
I think you've covered it.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. Thanks to Brooklyn and Gerardo and Julia and Maven and the OSF board and everyone who makes this possible. Thanks to Margie and Nemo and anyone who is a part of our team. You guys be good to each other, be kind to each other, and we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care.